There's a moment in season 2 of The Amazing World of Gumball, and I want you to picture this, where Richard Watterson, a 6'4" pink rabbit who has never held a job in his life, gets hired as a pizza delivery man, and the universe starts to collapse. Not metaphorically, not as some kind of emotional metaphor for change being scary. The literal fabric of reality begins tearing apart because this one man, this beautiful, dumb, enormous rabbit, dared to be employed. The sky inverts. Gravity reverses for senior citizen. The banana family gets stuck in an infinite loop, chanting pizza, 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 while their eyes glitch out. And Richard doesn't notice any of it. He's just riding his little scooter, rapping about how he's an Italian food distribution engineer. And here's the thing that kills me about this episode. The job isn't just funny. It's not just absurd. It's the first time this show looked you dead in the eyes and said, we know exactly what we are. We know we're a TV show. We know the status quo exists because we wrote it that way. And we're going to use that knowledge as a weapon. That's season 2. The show had been on the air for maybe a year and a half, and it was already doing things that most animated series never attempt across their entire runs. Tonight, we're going to talk about something that I think doesn't get said enough about The Amazing World of Gumball. Not that it's funny. Everyone knows it's funny. Not that it's weird. The show where a T-Rex, a balloon, a piece of toast, and a puppet made of a real human chin all go to the same middle school. Yeah, we know it's weird. What I want to talk about is the fact that this show gets better every single season, consistently, relentlessly, in ways that most shows, animated or otherwise, simply don't. Most shows peak somewhere around season 2 or 3, and then slowly coast on goodwill and diminishing returns. Gumball does the opposite. It starts as a charming, but slightly rough family cartoon, and evolves into one of the smartest, most emotionally complex, most visually inventive animated series ever made. And I don't think people appreciate just how rare that is. So settle in, get comfortable. If you're watching this late at night, maybe pull the covers up a little. We're going to walk through this show, season by season, episode by episode, where it matters, and I'm going to show you exactly how and why Gumball keeps getting better. How the characters deepen, how the animation evolves, how the writing goes from pretty good cartoon jokes to, wait, did a show about a blue cat just make me rethink my relationship with reality? If you're new to Cartoon, consider subscribing. We do these long, deep dives into animated series, and there's plenty more where this came from. But right now, it's just you and me and the Watterson. Let's go. I want to start with something that might sound counterintuitive. I love season 1 of Gumball. I genuinely do. But I also think it's important to be honest about what season 1 is and what it isn't, because understanding where this show started is the only way to appreciate how far it goes. The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on May 3rd, 2011 on Cartoon Network. It debuted in the UK on May 2nd, one day earlier, which makes sense when you know this is actually a British production. Created by Ben Bocquelet at Cartoon Network Development Studio Europe in London. Animated partly by Boulder Media in Dublin and Studio Soai in Germany. Right from the jump, this is an international production, which honestly explains a lot about why the show feels different from its American contemporaries. There's a sensibility here, a dryness, a willingness to let jokes breathe, a comfort with awkwardness that feels distinctly European, even though the show is set in the fictional American suburb of Elmore, California. And look, the origin story of this show is one of my favorite things in animation. Bocquelet was hired at Cartoon Network Europe in 2007 to help other people pitch their shows. That was his job, to help other creators get their ideas greenlit. But then the studio told all its employees to pitch their own ideas too. And Bocquelet had this collection of character designs he'd made for commercials over the years. Characters that had been rejected by clients. Designs that never went anywhere. And he thought, what if I took all these rejected characters and put them in one show? His original pitch was a series about a remedial school for cartoon characters, like a school for rejects. The network thought the concept was too sad, so he reworked it into a family sitcom, and The Amazing World of Gumball was born. Think about that for a second. The entire foundation of this show is built on the idea of giving rejected things a second chance. Characters that nobody wanted, designs that got thrown in the bin, all of them rescued and placed into this wild, mixed media world where they somehow all coexist. A 2D animated blue cat sits next to a 3D CGI T-Rex, who sits next to a puppet made of felt, who sits next to a character that's literally just a photograph of a chin with googly eyes stuck on it. And it works. It shouldn't work. By every rule of visual coherence, it should be a disaster. But Bocquelet and his team understood something fundamental, that the clash of styles is the point. The world looks like this because everyone in it is fundamentally different, and they all just have to figure out how to exist together anyway. Now, season 1, 36 6 episodes. And honestly, it's a show still figuring itself out. I know that sounds harsh, but bear with me, because this is actually a compliment in disguise. The characters in season 1 are recognizable, but not yet fully formed. Gumball is more naive, more of a wide-eyed kid, stumbling through situations. He hasn't developed that sharp, sarcastic edge that defines him later. Darwin in season 1 is basically just Gumball's slightly dumber echo. He doesn't have the moral compass, the earnest sweetness, the surprisingly firm ethical backbone that makes later Darwin so compelling. He's just there, being a sidekick. And the visual style, look, Season 1 is still gorgeous in its own way. The live-action backgrounds are there from the start, and the mixed media approach is already present and accounted for. But the character designs are rougher. Gumball and Nicole are a brighter shade of blue. The outlines are thinner. The facial expressions are wilder, but less controlled. Characters contort in ways that feel almost random rather than purposeful. There's a looseness to the animation that some people find charming and nostalgic, and I get that. But compared to what comes later, it's clear the show is still calibrating. The writing in season 1 tends towards simpler slice-of-life plots. Gumball and Darwin get lost in the forest. They try to return a doll. They deal with a bully. There's nothing wrong with any of this. The Mystery, which is actually the very first episode that aired in the UK, is a genuinely fun whodunit, where the kids have to figure out who wrapped Principal Brown in toilet paper. But the episodes rarely push beyond their premises. They set up a funny situation, they execute it competently, and they end. There's not a lot of thematic layering. There's not much meta commentary. The show isn't yet interrogating its own nature, or asking big questions about the world it's built. Here's the thing though, and this is what I mean about season 1 being important despite its roughness. All the raw materials are there. Every single thing that makes Gumball great is present in embryonic form during season 1. The mixed media world, the family dynamics, Nicole's barely contained fury, Richard's cosmic level incompetence, Aeneas being the smartest person in the room and the most overlooked, the sense that Elmore is a real place with real rules, even if those rules are insane. All of it is there. Season 1 is the foundation, and you can't build a skyscraper without pouring the concrete first. But then season 2 happens, and honestly, it's like someone turned a dial from charming kids show to what is this show actually capable of? Season 2 premiered on August 7, 2012, and right away you can see the differences. The character designs have been overhauled. Everyone's outlines are thicker. The colors are slightly different. The faces are rounder, softer, more expressive in a controlled way. There's a reason for this behind the scenes, and it's worth knowing. Boulder Media, which had handled much of the animation for season 1, was no longer involved. The show transitioned to being animated more in-house at Cartoon Network Europe's studio, with Studio Soei continuing to handle the CGI elements. This was partly a budget consideration, partly a creative one, but the result is a show that looks noticeably more polished and cohesive. But the real changes are in the writing. Season 2 is where the characters start becoming fully themselves. Gumball gets sharper, more cynical, more self-aware. He's still a goofball, still prone to spectacular failures, but there's an edge now. A kid who's starting to notice that the world doesn't always make sense and isn't afraid to comment on it. Darwin, meanwhile, begins to differentiate himself. He becomes the heart of the show, optimistic, moral, surprisingly fierce when pushed, and capable of calling Gumball on his nonsense in ways that feel genuine rather than scripted. And then there's The Job. We already talked about this one at the top, but I want to really dig into why this episode matters so much, because I think it's the single most important turning point in the show's entire run. The Job is the 8th episode of season 2. Richard gets a job delivering pizza. Reality starts breaking. Nicole is terrified, not because her husband might fail, but because the universe literally cannot handle Richard being employed. The status quo isn't just a storytelling convention, it's a law of physics in Elmore. This is the first time the show explicitly acknowledges that it has rules, and those rules are the rules of a TV show. The status quo exists because the show demands it. Richard can't have a job because the show needs him to not have a job. And when that convention is violated, reality itself punishes the transgression. The Banana family gets caught in a loop, chanting pizza, 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 while Richard's reality warping shockwaves glitch them out. The sky turns dark at noon. Snow falls in June. An elderly citizen starts floating upward because gravity decided to take the day off. It's simultaneously hilarious and genuinely unsettling. And it ends with Larry, the perpetually overworked, underpaid, everything employee of Elmore, firing Richard in a booming voice that sounds like the voice of God himself, and reality immediately snapping back to normal. The job was nominated for an Annie Award. It was, by many accounts, the first episode that made people sit up and say, wait, this isn't just a kids show, and it set the precedent for everything that came after. From this point forward, Gumball knew it was a TV show. Not always explicitly. Sometimes it would go back to pure comedy episodes, pure slice of life, pure absurdity, but the knowledge was there, lurking in the background, ready to be deployed when the moment was right. And season 2 deploys it beautifully. The internet sees Gumball and Darwin accidentally break the internet and have to deal with the consequences of a world without technology. Except the internet is an actual character, a living entity that can get angry and seek revenge. The World is an episode with no real plot, just vignettes showing what the background objects of Elmore get up to when the main characters aren't around. The food in the fridge, the planets in space, the bacteria on a keyboard. It's a show flexing its creative muscle, testing what it can get away with, seeing how far the format can stretch. But here's what I really want to highlight about season 2. It's not just the big experimental episodes that improve. The bread and butter character episodes get better too. The hero has Gumball and Darwin saying hurtful things about Richard behind his back, only for him to overhear. The way the show handles Richard's hurt feelings, this man who is genuinely stupid but loves his family with every fiber of his being, is surprisingly touching. It would have been easy to play it purely for laughs. Season 1 probably would have, but season 2 takes the time to let the moment land emotionally before resolving it. And can we talk about Nicole Watterson for a second? Because Nicole's arc across the series is one of the most fascinating things about Gumball, and it really starts taking shape in season 2. In season 1, Nicole is the strict mom. That's her role. She works hard, she gets angry, she keeps the family together through sheer force of will. And that's fine. It's a sitcom archetype. It's functional. But in season 2, we start seeing the cracks in the armor. We start understanding that Nicole isn't just strict, she's exhausted. She's carrying an entire family on her back, married to a man who cannot function independently, raising 3 children in a town where the laws of physics are suggestions at best. Her rage isn't a character quirk, it's a survival mechanism. I think about The Remote, one of the early season 2 episodes, where the entire family fights over the TV remote. It sounds like the most generic sitcom premise imaginable, but the way Gumball executes it, with the escalation, the strategic alliances, the genuine anger that bubbles up between family members, it becomes something more. It becomes a portrait of a family under pressure, held together by love, but fraying at the edges. And it's funny. It's really, really funny. But it's also honest in a way that season 1 rarely managed. Season 2 also gives us better supporting characters. The classmates at Elmore Junior High start to feel like real people. Well, real entities anyway. Carrie the Ghost gets more dimension. Banana Joe gets funnier. And we start to see the show develop its ensemble in a way that will pay massive dividends later. Every weird background character, the toast, the cloud, the cactus, the balloon, they're all being seeded with personalities and relationships that the show will eventually explore in depth. So here's my take on season 2, and I know some people might disagree with me here. I don't think season 2 is the best season of the show. I think it's the most important season. It's the bridge between good cartoon and great cartoon. It's where every element that will define the show's legacy is established or significantly refined. Without season 2, we don't get the Gumball that everyone fell in love with. We get a perfectly fine animated comedy that probably runs for 3 seasons and fades into obscurity. Season 2 is the season where Gumball became Gumball. But season 3? Season 3 is where things get really interesting. Season 3 of The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on June 5th, 2014. And I need to tell you about something that happened before this season even started airing. The show had to recast its 2 lead voice actors. Logan Grove and Kwesi Boki, who had voiced Gumball and Darwin since the beginning, had grown up. Their voices had changed. And for a show about 12-year-old kids who will be 12 forever, that's a problem you can't work around. So Jacob Hopkins took over as Gumball, and Terrell Ransom Jr. became Darwin. And honestly, the transition is handled about as gracefully as it could be. But here's what I love about how Gumball handles this behind-the-scenes reality. Instead of just swapping the voices and hoping nobody notices, the show actually acknowledges the change within its own narrative. The episode, The Kids, has Gumball and Darwin's voices literally cracking and changing, and they have to deal with the emotional reality of growing up and changing as people. It's a meta commentary on the practical constraints of voice acting in children's animation, but it's also genuinely emotional. These kids know they're changing. They can feel it happening, and the show treats that with real tenderness, even as it mines the situation for comedy. And that balance, tenderness and comedy, sincerity and absurdity, becomes the defining quality of season 3. This is the season where the emotional depth of the show takes a quantum leap forward, and there's one episode that basically redefines everything the show can be. I need to talk about The Shell. The Shell is the 20th episode of season 3, the 96th episode overall, and I genuinely think it might be the most important 11 minutes this show ever produced. Here's what happened. Gumball and Penny are performing in a school play, Beauty and the Beast, with Gumball as the Beast and Penny as Belle. At the end, they're supposed to kiss. Gumball is so nervous that he accidentally headbutts her instead, and the impact cracks Penny's shell. Now, up to this point in the series, Penny Fitzgerald has been an anthropomorphic antlered peanut. That's her design, a peanut with antlers and sneakers. She and Gumball have had crushes on each other since season 1, but they've never been able to express it properly. It's one of those running sitcom things. Will they or won't they? Missed connections, comedic interruptions every time they get close. The Shell ends that permanently. When Penny's shell cracks, we see something glowing underneath. And throughout the episode, as the crack spreads, Penny becomes increasingly frightened. She doesn't want anyone to see what's under her shell. Her father, Patrick, is furious at Gumball and tries to keep them apart. And eventually, Penny's shell breaks completely, and she transforms into a shape-shifting fairy-like creature whose form changes based on her emotions. When she's scared, she becomes a monster. When she's angry, she becomes a dragon. And when she feels beautiful and loved, she glows. Ben Bacalé described this episode as Miyazaki-esque, and he wasn't being hyperbolic. The references to Spirited Away, Princess Mononoke, and Howl's Moving Castle are deliberate and visible. Penny's dragon form resembles Haku. Her wolf form evokes Princess Mononoke. The entire chase sequence through Elmore as Gumball pursues the increasingly monstrous Penny to tell her that he loves her no matter what she looks like has the emotional sweep and visual ambition of a Studio Ghibli film compressed into 11 minutes of Cartoon Network television. And the resolution, God, the resolution. Penny, in her wolf form, exhausted and afraid, asks Gumball if he could really love her like this, and he kisses her. Not Fairy Penny, not Peanut Penny, Wolf Penny, Monster Penny. The version of herself that she thinks is the ugliest and most unlovable. He kisses that version, and she transforms back into her true self, radiant, glowing, fairy-like. And from this point forward, Penny stays out of her shell. She never goes back. The status quo changes permanently. That's enormous. For a sitcom, animated or otherwise, to permanently alter one of its most foundational dynamics is incredibly rare. Most shows tease changes and then reset by the end of the episode. Gumball commits. Penny is different now. Her relationship with Gumball is different. Her family dynamics are different. And the show will spend the next 3 seasons exploring the consequences of this change, including the transformation in season 6, where her family argues about whether to follow her example and come out of their own shells. The Shell won Best Children's Series and the Children's Choice Award at the 2016 British Animation Awards, and it deserves every accolade it received. But what I find most impressive isn't the episode itself, it's the confidence it represents. Season 3, Gumball is a show that trusts its audience. It trusts that kids can handle complexity. It trusts that a story about a shape-shifting fairy can also be a story about self-acceptance and vulnerability and the terror of being truly seen by another person. It trusts that you can make people laugh and make them feel something at the same time. And the Shell is far from the only highlight of season 3. The name reveals that Gumball's real name is Zack, and when he starts going by it, he develops an entirely new, obnoxious personality that threatens to erase the Gumball we know. A metaphor for how the names and labels we adopt can change who we are. The Void introduces one of the show's most important ongoing concepts, a dimension where the world's mistakes are sent, things that don't fit, things that have been deemed unnecessary, or failed experiments. And when Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small venture into the Void to rescue their forgotten classmate Molly, they discover something terrifying. The Void contains real things, discarded ideas, canceled shows, mistakes that society has chosen to erase from memory. It's a commentary on media, on nostalgia, on the disposability of entertainment, and it's done with such a light touch that you barely notice how deep it goes. Let me take a slight tangent here, because I think it's worth talking about what was happening in animation when season 3 aired. In 2014, Cartoon Network was in the middle of what I think of as its second golden age. Adventure Time was in its 6th season, exploring increasingly complex, emotional, and narrative territory. Steven Universe had just premiered. Regular Show was going strong, and Gumball, sitting alongside all of these shows, was quietly becoming something none of them were: a deconstruction of the animated sitcom itself. While Adventure Time built elaborate fantasy lore, and Steven Universe crafted deeply personal stories about identity and trauma, Gumball was turning inward, examining the very mechanics of what it means to be a show. And that's what Season 3 establishes as Gumball's unique territory. It's not a fantasy epic. It's not an emotional drama. It's a show about a show that's slowly becoming aware it's a show. And the more aware it becomes, the more interesting things it can do. Season 3 also sees a significant improvement in the animation quality. The 2D characters move with more fluidity and intentionality. The live-action backgrounds are integrated more seamlessly, and the show starts commissioning guest animators for special sequences, something that would become increasingly important in later seasons. Julian Glander, for instance, contributes a 3D animated sequence to the transformation. These guest animator moments give the show opportunities to push its visual identity even further, turning individual scenes into showcases of animation technique that feel unlike anything else on television. I want to stay with the idea of visual evolution for a moment, because I think it's one of the most underappreciated aspects of Gumball's improvement over time. When people talk about the show getting better, they usually focus on the writing, the sharper jokes, the deeper themes, the meta-narrative, and all of that is true, but the animation evolves just as dramatically, and the two are inseparable. In Season 1, the mixed media approach was novel, but sometimes felt like a gimmick. Characters from different animation styles existed in the same space, but they didn't always interact with that space in convincing ways. By Season 3, the show has figured out how to make the stylistic clashes feel natural and purposeful. When a 2D character interacts with a CGI character, there's weight and texture to the interaction. When a live-action background appears behind a cartoon character, the lighting matches. The compositing, the process of layering all these different elements together into a single coherent frame, has become genuinely sophisticated. Studio Soy, the German studio that handles the CGI elements, had been refining their pipeline since the very beginning. They set up the technical infrastructure during Season 1 and expanded their role in Season 2 to include 2D in-betweening, rendering, and compositing. By Season 3, the collaboration between the London-based writing and storyboarding team and the animation studios is seamless. Mike Graves, who directed every episode of the first 4 seasons, has said that the real magic of the show is in the writing and the storyboarding process. But I'd argue it's equally in the compositing. The art of making all these wildly different visual elements feel like they belong in the same universe. And here's something that I think is really worth pointing out. Gumball uses its mixed media nature as a storytelling tool, not just an aesthetic choice. When characters change form, or when reality breaks, the animation style itself shifts. A character might briefly become live action, or the entire scene might switch to a different art style. And these shifts carry meaning. They're not random, they're deliberate choices that communicate something about the emotional or narrative state of the scene. By Season 3, the show is deploying this technique with real sophistication. Alright, let's talk about Season 4, because this is where things get properly wild. Season 4 premiered on July 7, 2015, and right out of the gate, it announces its intention. The season premiere is The Nemesis, which picks up a thread from The Void and turns it into something extraordinary. Remember Rob? In Seasons 1 and 2, Rob was literally just a background character, a Cyclops kid who appeared in crowd scenes and had no personality, no dialogue, nothing. He was furniture. And then, in The Void, when Gumball and Darwin venture into the dimension where the world's mistakes are sent, they unknowingly leave Rob behind. He escapes the Void, but he comes back damaged. His body is glitched, parts of him are missing. He's been broken by the experience of being deemed irrelevant. In The Nemesis, Gumball and Darwin discover that Rob is trying to be a villain, but he's terrible at it. Nobody takes him seriously. His evil schemes are pathetic, and in a moment of accidental cruelty that becomes one of the show's most important narrative decisions, Gumball and Darwin decide to help him become a better villain. They literally assign him the role of Nemesis, because all the other character archetypes in their world are already taken. Think about what the show is doing here. It's taking a literal background character, someone who existed only to fill space, and giving him a story about what it feels like to be deemed unnecessary. Rob's anger isn't arbitrary. He's angry because he was forgotten, because the main characters, our heroes, the people we root for, didn't notice him when he needed help. He fell into the void, into oblivion, and they didn't even see it happen. And now, the best he can hope for is the role of the bad guy, because at least the bad guy matters to the story. That's devastating. That's the kind of thematic complexity that most prestige dramas don't manage. And it's happening in an 11-minute cartoon on Cartoon Network about a blue cat and his goldfish brother. Season 4 builds on this foundation with The Signal, an episode where the broadcast itself starts glitching. The signal that carries the show to your TV is deteriorating, and as it does, reality in Elmore fragments. Characters repeat actions, dialogue gets scrambled, and the episode ends with the horrifying revelation that Gumball and his world are aware, on some level, that they exist as a television signal that could be disrupted at any moment. It's the show's most explicit acknowledgement yet of its own medium. And then come The Disaster and the rerun, the Season 4 finale, and Season 5 premiere, which together form what I consider the show's masterpiece. Rob gets his hands on a universal remote. Not a regular remote, but one that controls the actual universe the way a TV remote controls a broadcast. He can pause, he can rewind, he can change the subtitles, he can adjust the aspect ratio, and he uses every one of these functions to systematically destroy Gumball's life. I need to describe this because it's genuinely incredible. Rob uses the subtitle function to create fake text over Gumball's dialogue, making Darwin think Gumball is insulting him. He uses the picture-in-picture function to distract characters at critical moments. He changes the aspect ratio to physically crush Gumball between the edges of the frame. He makes Nicole and Richard so angry at each other that they decide to get divorced. He destroys Gumball's relationship with Penny. He dismantles everything Gumball cares about, piece by piece, using the tools of television production as weapons. And at the climax, with everything ruined, Gumball is given a choice: fall into the void and be forgotten forever, or press rewind and try again. He presses rewind. The rerun picks up with Gumball reliving the same day, trying to prevent Rob's attack, and the whole thing plays out like a Groundhog Day scenario where the stakes keep escalating. At one point, the rewind function accidentally de-ages Nicole and Richard into teenagers, then babies, and then, in one of the show's most genuinely heartbreaking moments, Anais simply ceases to exist, because if their parents never grew up, she was never born. The ending of the rerun is bittersweet in the best possible way. Gumball saves everyone, but only by sacrificing the universal remote, which means the day resets, and nobody remembers what happened. Nobody except Rob, who is left more damaged and more bitter than before. And Gumball, who retains a vague feeling that something terrible happened, but can't quite remember what. These two episodes earned the show widespread critical attention and solidified Gumball's reputation as one of the most creative animated series on television. They also established that the show was building something, a long-form narrative about the nature of fiction itself, told through the lens of a family sitcom, about cartoon characters who are slowly realizing they're cartoon characters. But I don't want to give the impression that Season 4 is all meta-narrative and dramatic stakes. It's also just flat out one of the funniest seasons of the show. The Slap is a masterclass in absurdist comedy. Gumball becomes obsessed with getting a butt slap greeting from Tobias, and the escalation is so perfectly calibrated that every new development makes you laugh harder. The Nest turns the evil turtle from the puppy into a full-blown Elmore-threatening menace. The Gift has one of the most chaotic chase sequences in the show's history. And then there's The Origins, the show's first ever two-part episode, which tells the story of how Darwin became part of the Watterson family. This is where the show proves it can do genuine, earnest, emotional storytelling without a trace of irony. We see Nicole and Richard as young parents, exhausted by toddler Gumball's hyperactive behavior, buying goldfish after goldfish to keep him occupied, and every single one dies in increasingly absurd ways. Richard accidentally kills them all, until they buy one final fish from a mysterious van, the same van that shows up throughout the series selling impossible items. And this fish is different. This is Darwin. When Darwin gets accidentally flushed down the toilet, he doesn't give up. He swims through the sewers, out into the ocean, across beaches and deserts, growing lungs and legs through sheer force of will and the power of his bond with Gumball. The show frames it as love literally causing evolution. Darwin transforms because he refuses to let distance separate him from his brother. In the reunion, when Gumball senses Darwin's presence at the Elmore Mall and runs to find him, and they meet in slow motion as a heart explodes behind them, it's silly and beautiful, and I cry every time. I'm not ashamed of that. A show about a goldfish growing legs because he loves his brother should not make a grown person cry, but here we are. The Origins won a British Academy Children's Award in 2016, and it deserved it. But what makes it relevant to the Gumball gets better every season argument is that season 1 never could have pulled this off. The emotional groundwork wasn't there yet. We didn't know these characters well enough, didn't care about them deeply enough for a story about their origins to land with this kind of impact. Season 4 earns the emotional payoff that season 1 planted, and that's really the key to understanding Gumball's improvement. It's cumulative. Each season builds on what came before. The characters become richer because we've spent more time with them. The emotional stakes become higher because we're more invested. The meta commentary becomes more pointed because the show has established enough rules to meaningfully break them. It's not that the writers suddenly got better at their jobs. It's that they designed a show that rewards patience and accumulation, where every episode adds another layer to a world that becomes more complex and more rewarding the longer you spend in it. Let me take another tangent here because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. There's a conversation in animation criticism about whether shows should have serialized narratives or stay episodic, and I think Gumball offers a really interesting third option. It's overwhelmingly episodic. You can watch almost any episode in any order and enjoy it on its own terms. But underneath the episodic structure, there's a web of continuity that rewards close attention. Rob's arc from background character to villain to tragic anti-hero unfolds across dozens of episodes spread over multiple seasons. Penny's transformation and its consequences ripple through the show for years. The Void, established in season 3, becomes increasingly central to the show's mythology. Even small details, Banana Barbara's prophetic paintings, first glimpsed in The Shell, become plot relevant much later. This is different from, say, Adventure Time's approach, where the serialization becomes increasingly dominant over time, or Steven Universe's approach, where standalone episodes and serialized episodes coexist, but the latter clearly take priority. Gumball never loses its episodic identity. It never asks you to do homework before watching, but if you have done the homework, if you've been paying attention, there are layers and connections that transform the experience. It's a show that rewards both casual viewing and obsessive analysis, which is a really difficult balance to strike. Alright, Season 5. This is where things get philosophically heavy, and I mean that literally. Season 5 of The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on September 1st, 2016, and it opens with The Rerun, which we already discussed. But the season quickly establishes that it's interested in going even deeper into big questions. The Choices is a standout. It's an episode focused entirely on Nicole, showing what her life would have been like if she'd made different decisions as a teenager. We see alternate timelines where she married different people, pursued different careers, lived entirely different lives, and the episode's conclusion that despite everything, despite the chaos and the exhaustion and the frustration, Nicole wouldn't change a single thing about her life with the Wattersons, is the kind of moment that sneaks up on you. I need to describe The Choices in more detail because I think it's one of the most emotionally sophisticated episodes of any animated series, period. Nicole is sitting at the dinner table while her family is being their usual chaotic selves. Food is flying, everyone's yelling, it's pandemonium, and she pauses, freezes, actually. And the episode becomes a flashback to her childhood, where we see that young Nicole was a lonely, intense kid pushed relentlessly by her parents to succeed. Her mother considered being a girl an F on her report card. Her father was cold and demanding. And then Nicole met Richard. Richard, who is everything her parents taught her to avoid. Lazy, unambitious, soft, stupid, but also kind, also gentle, also unconditionally loving, in a way that Nicole had never experienced. The episode shows the exact moment they first interact, and it's this beautiful, quiet scene of two kids who don't fit anywhere else finding each other. Then the episode branches into alternate timelines. What if Nicole had never met Richard? What if she'd married Harold Wilson instead? A successful, respectable man? In that timeline, Nicole is miserable, trapped in a loveless marriage, her rage directed at her husband's mundane shortcomings. What if she'd focused on her karate career? In that timeline, she's alone, successful, but empty. Every path that seems better on paper leads to Nicole being less herself, less happy, less whole. And then we come back to the present, to the dinner table, to the chaos. And Nicole starts laughing. She starts a food fight because she realizes, genuinely, deeply, in her bones, that this mess, this beautiful, stupid, catastrophic mess, is exactly where she belongs. The Choices is one of the first episodes where the show explicitly deals with the idea that Nicole named her children after her own family. Gumball's real name is Zach, though he had it legally changed to Gumball. Long story, season 3. But Nicole, Richard, and Aeneas, all named after Baukelei's real family. His mother, his father, his sister. The show is, in many ways, Baukelei's love letter to his own family, rendered in the language of cartoon absurdity. Season 5 also deepens the show's engagement with social commentary. The best has Darwin becoming a social justice activist who takes his principles to absurd extreme. The diet takes on the fast food industry. The copycats. Oh man, the copycats is something special. This episode introduces Chi-Chi and Ribbit, two characters who are blatant copies of Gumball and Darwin, and the entire episode is a thinly veiled critique of a Chinese animated series called Miracle Star that was widely accused of being a Gumball ripoff. The episode addresses copyright infringement, creative theft, and the frustration of having your work stolen, all through the lens of Gumball being increasingly disturbed by these eerily familiar strangers who do everything he does but slightly worse. And here's the thing about the copycats that makes it work. It's not mean-spirited. It could have been. It would have been easy to make it a pure takedown. But instead, Gumball actually expresses a kind of existential horror at the idea that he might not be original. If someone can copy him exactly, what does that say about his own uniqueness? Is he himself just a copy of some earlier archetype? The episode raises these questions and then resolves them by changing the voice actors for Gumball and Darwin mid-episode. The in-universe explanation for why their voices have changed again. The show recast to Jacob Hopkins and Terrell Ransom Jr. in season 3. And now Nicholas Cantu takes over as Gumball and Danielle T. Hansley Jr. as Darwin in season 5, with Christian J. Simon later replacing Hansley as Darwin partway through season 6, which is itself a commentary on how children's shows must constantly renew themselves while maintaining their identity. I'm going to be honest, I think the voice actor transitions in Gumball are handled better than in any other animated series I can think of. Most shows either ignore the change or make an awkward joke about it. Gumball weaves it into its meta-narrative. The characters' voices change because they're characters in a show, and shows change. The actors are just the latest people inhabiting these roles. It's actually kind of beautiful, in a way. It makes the characters feel bigger than any individual performance. Season 5 also gives us The Puppets, which might be the weirdest episode of the entire series. Gumball and Darwin find a box of old puppets in the attic, and these puppets, clearly designed to evoke "Don't hug me, I'm scared," begin to influence them, dragging them into increasingly disturbing scenarios. The episode is a collaboration with the actual creators of Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared, and it pushes Gumball into genuinely creepy territory that I still find unsettling on rewatches. But it works because by season 5, we trust the show to take us to dark places and bring us back safely. And the emotional episodes in season 5 hit harder than ever. The X revisits Gumball and Rob's nemesis relationship, but from a new angle. Rob has moved on to a new nemesis, Banana Joe, and Gumball is devastated, treating the situation like a breakup. The show plays it for comedy, but underneath the jokes, there's a genuine commentary on how even toxic relationships can feel preferable to being forgotten. Rob doesn't hate Gumball specifically. He hates the role he's been forced to play. But Gumball needs the dynamic, because without a nemesis, who is he? What's his story? These are the kinds of questions that season 5 is obsessed with. What makes a story? What makes a character? If you strip away the plot and the conflict and the drama, what's left? And these questions don't just apply to the show's meta-narrative. They apply to the characters' real, emotionally genuine lives as well. The genius of Gumball is that the meta layer and the emotional layer are never in conflict. The show can simultaneously be about cartoon characters realizing they're in a cartoon, and about a family that genuinely loves each other, and neither element undermines the other. I want to linger on this point because I think it's the most important thing I can say about why Gumball gets better every season. A lot of shows that do meta commentary eventually disappear up their own narrative, becoming so consumed with cleverness that they forget to be human. Community is a great show, but its later seasons sometimes felt more interested in deconstructing storytelling than in telling stories. Gumball never falls into that trap. No matter how meta it gets, no matter how many fourth walls it breaks, the emotional core stays solid. You always care about the Wattersons. You always believe that Gumball loves Darwin, that Nicole is holding it together for her family, that Richard's incompetence comes from innocence rather than malice, that Anais is simultaneously the most capable person in the room and a lonely little girl who just wants to play with her brother. That emotional foundation is what makes the meta commentary meaningful. When the show eventually explores the idea that its world might end when the show gets canceled, that the void will swallow Elmore when the story stops being told. It's not just a clever concept, it's genuinely stakes-raising, because we care about these characters and don't want their world to end. The meta and the emotional feed each other in a virtuous cycle that gets stronger with every season. Alright, deep breath. Let's talk about Season 6. Season 6 of The Amazing World of Gumball premiered on January 5th, 2018. It's the longest season, 44 episodes, compared to the standard 40, because it was designed to make up for the 4-episode shortage in Season 1. And it's the final season of the original run, because Ben Bacalé announced in September 2016 that he would be departing the show after Season 6. That announcement cast a shadow over the entire season, not a negative one necessarily, more of an urgency. A sense that the show had a finite amount of time left and needed to make every episode count. And to its credit, Season 6 delivers on that urgency with some of the most ambitious episodes in the show's history. The Inquisition, the Season 6 and series finale, is one of the most controversial episodes in Gumball's history. Here's what happens. A new superintendent named Superintendent Evil, I mean, he's literally called that, and nobody questions it, which is peak Gumball, arrives at Elmore Junior High and starts transforming all the students from their various animated forms into live-action people. He's forcing them to become normal, to be realistic, to stop being cartoons. And then, in the final minutes, it's revealed that Superintendent Evil is actually Rob. Rob, the forgotten background character turned villain turned tragic hero, because Rob's plan to transform everyone into live action isn't motivated by cruelty, it's motivated by survival. He knows that the show is ending. He knows that when the show ends, the void will swallow Elmore and everyone in it will cease to exist. His plan is to transform everyone into something that can survive in the real world, to make them real so that they can outlive their own show. And the Elmore characters refuse. They choose to stay as they are, cartoons, in all their weird, mixed media, impossible glory, even if it means the end. They'd rather go out as themselves than continue as something they're not. It's a statement about artistic integrity, about authenticity, about the value of being true to what you are, even when the alternative is oblivion. And then the void opens up and swallows everything. End of series. Now, I have some thoughts about this ending, and I know the fandom has a lot of thoughts about this ending. Bacalé himself has said that the cliffhanger was not entirely his choice. The show's cancellation and the planned but not yet produced movie created a situation where the story couldn't be fully resolved within the series itself. The intention was always for a movie to bridge the gap and provide resolution. And that movie is still in development as of the time I'm recording this, though as of late 2025, the movie's status remains in flux. Bacalé has said the film is in debate about being re-greenlit, with a reworked story and new angle he wants to pursue. But the ending, even in its incomplete form, is remarkable. It's a show about a cartoon world that chooses to die rather than stop being a cartoon. That's powerful. That's the kind of thematic ambition that most live-action prestige TV shows never reach. And the fact that it's delivered in a show that also contains an episode where Gumball tries to get a butt slap from a rainbow-colored jock, that contrast, that range, is exactly what makes Gumball special. And look, the resolution is coming. The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, the revival series, which premiered on Hulu on July 28, 2025, and on Cartoon Network internationally in October, picks up where The Inquisition left off, with a meta justification for the show's 7-year absence baked right into the first episode. Gumball and Darwin wake up fossilized in their abandoned house and realize they've been asleep for 7 years, because the show wasn't airing for 7 years, because they are the show, and now it's back, and so are they. The revival brought new voice actors again: Alcayo Thile as Gumball, Hero Hunter as Darwin, and Kinza Syed Khan as Aeneas, with Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell returning as Nicole and Richard. And early reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. The second season dropped in December 2025, and a third and fourth season have been ordered. The show is continuing to evolve, continuing to improve, continuing to find new things to say about its world and its characters. But that's a story for another night. Right now, I want to come back to the question we started with. Why does the amazing world of Gumball get better every season? And I want to give you my honest answer, not just a catalog of improvement points. I think Gumball gets better every season because it's a show that's fundamentally about growth, and it practices what it preaches. The Wattersons grow. Gumball goes from a naive kid to a sharp, self-aware teenager who understands the mechanics of his own world. Darwin goes from a sidekick to a moral compass. Nicole goes from strict mum to one of the most complex, layered, heartbreaking characters in animation. Penny literally breaks out of her shell and becomes something new. Rob goes from a background extra to the show's most fascinating character. Every single recurring character in in the show undergoes meaningful development, and that development is cumulative and irreversible. But the show itself also grows. It goes from a simple family sitcom to a meditation on the nature of fiction. It goes from generic slice-of-life plots to existential explorations of identity, purpose, and the relationship between creator and creation. It goes from competent mixed media animation to some of the most visually inventive work in the medium. And it does all of this without losing its sense of humor, without becoming pretentious, without ever forgetting that it's supposed to be fun. I keep coming back to this idea that Gumball is built from rejected things, rejected character designs, rejected commercial concepts, a concept that was initially deemed too sad. And the show took all of those rejections and turned them into something that has won 8 BAFTA Children's Awards, an Annie Award, an International Emmy, and the hearts of millions of people around the world. The show is proof of its own thesis, that the things the world discards can become the things the world treasures, if they're given the chance to grow. And every season is another chance to grow. Season 1 plants the seeds. Season 2 waters them. Season 3 lets them bloom. Season 4 reveals the root system underneath. Season 5 explores the ecosystem. Season 6 contemplates what happens when the garden has to end. And the revival seasons prove that even after the garden goes dormant, it can come back stronger than ever. Here's the other thing I keep thinking about. I mentioned at the beginning that most shows peak somewhere around season 2 or 3. Why is that? I think it's because most shows are designed to deliver a specific experience. And once that experience has been fully articulated, there's nowhere else to go. The best season is the one where the show most perfectly captures what it's trying to be. After that, it's diminishing returns. The same experience, slightly less fresh each time. Gumball avoids this because it never stops redefining what it's trying to be. Season 1 is trying to be a charming family sitcom. Season 2 is trying to be a clever, experimental cartoon. Season 3 is trying to be an emotionally resonant coming-of-age story. Season 4 is trying to be a deconstructive meta-narrative. Season 5 is trying to be a philosophical inquiry wrapped in comedy. Season 6 is trying to be a meditation on endings and identity. Each season has a different ambition, and each season achieves that ambition more fully than the last. This is incredibly difficult to sustain. It requires a creative team that's willing to take risks, that's comfortable with reinvention, that trusts its audience to come along on a journey that keeps changing direction. And it requires a world flexible enough to accommodate all these different ambitions, which is exactly what Gumball's mixed media world provides. When your show looks like a collision of every animation style ever invented, you can tell any kind of story. The visual language of the show is infinitely adaptable, and the creative team uses that adaptability to its fullest extent. Let me talk about something else that I think is under-discussed: the music. Ben Lockett, who composed the show's music from the very beginning, is one of the unsung heroes of Gumball's improvement. The early seasons had a perfectly serviceable cartoon soundtrack, bouncy, energetic, appropriate. But as the show's ambitions grew, so did the music. Season 3's emotional moments are underscored with genuine beauty. The Shell has music that rivals feature film scores. The Origins has Darwin's Journey song, I'm On My Way, which is achingly sincere and emotionally devastating. By seasons 4, 5, and 6, the show's musical range encompasses everything from orchestral drama to electronic glitch art to punk rock to lullabies. The music gets better every season too, because it has to. It's being asked to support increasingly complex, emotional, and narrative content. I also want to give credit to the show's voice directors and actors. The voice transitions I mentioned earlier, from Logan Grove and Kwesi Boki to Jacob Hopkins and Terrell Ransom Jr. to Nicholas Cantu and Danielle T. Hansley Jr., with Christian J. Simon taking over Darwin in season 6, and now to Alcayo Thiele and Hero Hunter, are a unique challenge. Most animated shows have one voice actor per character for the entire run. Gumball has had to maintain its characters' identities across multiple performers, and it's done so remarkably well. Each new Gumball voice brings something slightly different, a new shade, a different energy, but the character remains recognizably Gumball. That's a testament to both the writing and the voice direction. And Teresa Gallagher and Dan Russell, who have played Nicole and Richard from the very beginning and continue to play them in the revival, deserve special mention. Their performances have deepened enormously over the years. Gallagher's Nicole in season 1 is funny and intense. Her Nicole in season 6 is all of that, plus heartbreaking, vulnerable, fierce, exhausted, loving, and complex. Russell's Richard has gone from dumb dad to accidentally enlightened fool who understands the universe on a level that nobody, including himself, comprehends. These are the kind of performances that only get richer with time, and they're a big part of why the later seasons feel so emotionally substantial. I want to do something here that might be a little unconventional. I want to list some of the things that I think make Gumball uniquely suited to getting better over time, the structural and creative choices that enable the show's improvement trajectory. Because I don't think it's a coincidence that this particular show keeps getting better. I think it's a result of very specific design decisions that Bacalé and his team made early on. First, the episodic structure with optional serialization. This gives the show maximum flexibility. It can experiment wildly in any individual episode without worrying about breaking a serialized narrative. If an experiment doesn't work, it's just one episode. The next one can go in a completely different direction. But when the show wants to build something long-term, Rob's arc, the Void mythology, Penny's transformation, it can do that too, layering in continuity that accumulates over time without ever becoming mandatory viewing. Second, the mixed media visual style. This is maybe the most important structural decision Bacalé ever made. By building the show's visual identity around the idea that any animation style can coexist with any other, he created a world with infinite visual potential. The show can look like anything. It can incorporate any technique, reference any style, commission any guest animator. There's no visual ceiling to hit. Every season can push the look further because the show's aesthetic is, by design, limitless. Third, the ensemble cast. Elmore is populated with dozens of distinctive characters, each with their own design, personality, and potential for spotlight episodes. This gives the show an enormous well of material to draw from. When the main family's stories need a break, the show can pivot to Alan the Balloon's secret political ambitions, or Larry's existential crisis about being overworked, or Sussie's bizarre home life, or any of 100 other characters. The ensemble is the show's renewable resource. There's always someone new to explore, always a new angle on a familiar face. Fourth, the meta-awareness. By establishing early on that the show is aware of its own nature, Gumball created a framework for endless creative reinvention. The show can comment on itself, on other shows, on the medium of animation, on the nature of storytelling itself, and each time it does this, it opens new doors. The meta-awareness isn't a gimmick. It's a tool that allows the show to keep evolving, because there's always another layer of self-awareness to explore. And fifth, the tonal range. Gumball can be hilarious one second and devastating the next. It can be absurd and sincere, satirical and heartfelt, creepy and comforting. This tonal flexibility means the show is never trapped in one mode. It can always surprise you, always take you somewhere you didn't expect, always find a new emotional register to explore. All of these elements work together to create a show that is structurally incapable of stagnation. Every season has new stories to tell, new visual territory to explore, new emotional depths to plumb, new meta layers to peel back. The show was designed to grow, and it does. And I want to circle back to something I said earlier about Ben Bacalé, because I think his background is genuinely relevant here. He came from commercial animation. He worked at Studio AKA, making advertisements. Commercials are, by their nature, exercises in efficiency. You have 30 seconds or 60 seconds to communicate a complete idea with maximum impact. And I think that training shows in Gumball's DNA. Every episode is 11 minutes long. Every scene, every joke, every emotional beat has to earn its place. There's no filler. There's no padding. And because the show is so tight, so precisely calibrated, every improvement is immediately noticeable. When the writing gets sharper, you feel it within the first minute of an episode. When the animation gets better, it's visible in every frame. This efficiency also means that the show accumulates quality at a remarkable rate. 240 episodes, each one 11 minutes long, each one operating at a high level of craft. That's an enormous body of work, and the consistency is staggering. There are weak episodes, sure, every show has them, but Gumball's floor is higher than most shows' ceiling, and its best episodes are among the finest 11 minutes of animation ever produced. Let me come back down from the analytical clouds for a moment and just talk about some of the things I love about this show on a pure, visceral, this makes me happy level. I love that Darwin calls his parents Mr. Dad, and Mrs. Mom. It started as a throwaway joke when he was first adopted and just stuck. And the show never explains why they let him keep doing it. They just do. Because that's who Darwin is. A little bit formal, a little bit weird, entirely sincere, and the family loves him exactly as he is. I love that Gumball's real name is Zach, and that when he briefly went by that name in season 3, it literally made him a different, worse person. The idea that your name can change who you are, that identity is partly constructed by the labels you accept, is the kind of concept that you could build an entire philosophy course around. And Gumball dispenses it in 11 minutes, alongside a scene where a banana watches an orange being peeled like it's an inappropriate video. I love Nicole's fight scenes. They're absurd and over the top and clearly inspired by anime, and they function as a perfect visual expression of her character. A woman with so much pent-up energy and frustration that she could literally destroy the world if she unleashed it all at once. The show doesn't just tell us Nicole is strong, it shows us, in sequences that are kinetic and visceral, and occasionally terrifying. I love the way the show handles Larry Needlemeyer. Larry works every single job in Elmore. Every single one. He's the cashier at every store, the delivery driver, the gas station attendant, the bank teller, the doctor, the police officer. And the show never explains why. It just is. And the genius of it is that over time, Larry becomes the most sympathetic character in the show, because we see how the Wattersons and the rest of Elmore constantly abuse and take advantage of him. The Pizza is the episode where Larry finally snaps and quits all his jobs, and society immediately collapses. The message is clear. Larry is the only thing holding this world together, and nobody appreciates him. I love the backgrounds. Those live-action photographs of real streets and buildings and parks, with cartoon characters layered on top. There's something about that combination that makes Elmore feel simultaneously familiar and alien. You recognize the buildings, the streets, the color of the sky, but something's off. Something's not quite right. And that uncanny quality, the sense that Elmore is almost real, but not quite, gives the show a unique atmosphere that no purely animated show can replicate. I love that the show's satire never punches down. When it mocks social media culture, or political correctness taken to extremes, or the hollowness of corporate culture, it does so from a place of intelligence rather than cruelty. The targets are always systems and behaviors, not individuals. And the show is equally willing to mock itself, to acknowledge its own conventions, its own laziness, its own recycled jokes. That self-awareness keeps the satire honest. And I really, genuinely, deeply love that this show was made by a guy who took a bunch of characters that nobody wanted and gave them a home. Because isn't that what Gumball is about at its core? The Watterson family is a collection of misfits. A blue cat, a pink rabbit, a goldfish, another pink rabbit. They shouldn't work as a family unit. They're different species, different animation styles, different everything, but they love each other. They stick together. They fight and make up and drive each other insane and save each other's lives and watch TV together on a couch that can barely hold their combined weight. The show itself is built the same way. 2D animation, CGI, live action photography, stop motion, puppetry, flash animation, all these different techniques that shouldn't coexist in the same frame. But they do. They work. They make something that no single style could create on its own. And that's why the show gets better every season. Because every season, the family gets a little more comfortable with each other, and the show gets a little more comfortable with itself. Every season adds new members to the creative family. New animators, new writers, new voice actors, and each edition makes the whole richer. Every season finds new ways to combine its disparate elements into something cohesive and beautiful and funny and strange. The Amazing World of Gumball is a show about finding beauty in chaos, about finding family among rejects, about finding depth in what seems shallow and meaning in what seems silly. And the reason it gets better every season is the same reason its characters get better every season. Because it never stops growing, never stops reaching, never stops trying to figure out what else it can be. When I started rewatching the show from the beginning to prepare for this video, I expected to find a clear decline at some point. Some season where the energy drops, where the ideas run thin, where the law of diminishing returns finally catches up. And I kept watching. Season 1, charming, rough around the edges, full of potential. Season 2, sharper, funnier, more ambitious, the show finding its voice. Season 3, deeper, braver, emotionally richer, permanently altering its own status quo. Season 4, wilder, more complex, building a meta-mythology while delivering the show's best emotional episodes. Season 5, more philosophical, more satirical, more willing to sit with difficult questions. Season 6, urgent, ambitious, attempting nothing less than a commentary on its own mortality. Every season season is better than the last. Not by a little, by a lot. The gap between Season 1 Gumball and Season 6 Gumball is one of the largest quality jumps I've ever seen in a television series, animated or otherwise. And the revival is picking up right where it left off, continuing to push, continuing to grow, continuing to prove that Elmore still has stories worth telling. If you haven't watched The Amazing World of Gumball, start from the beginning. Yes, Season 1 is the weakest. That's by design. You need to see where the show starts to appreciate where it goes. You need to meet Season 1 Gumball to understand how much he changes. You need to see the rough animation to recognize the polish. You need to sit with the simpler stories to feel the impact when the complex ones arrive. And if you have watched it, maybe watch it again. Because here's the final thing I'll say about why this show gets better every season. It also gets better every time you watch it. The callbacks you missed, the foreshadowing you didn't catch, the background gags you scrolled past, the thematic through lines that only become visible in retrospect. Gumball is a show that rewards rewatching as generously as it rewards patience. And I can't think of a higher compliment than that. It's a show built from rejected things that became something irreplaceable. It's a family made of mismatched parts that holds together through love. It's a world that looks like chaos, but operates with breathtaking precision. And every single season, it gets better. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. And if you're still awake, maybe queue up one more episode. I won't tell anyone. Actually, wait. Before I wrap this up, I want to go back and talk about some things I skipped over because I was moving fast. And there are episodes and moments and creative decisions that deserve more attention. I said this would be thorough, and I meant it. So let's rewind, which, fittingly, is something this show loves to do. Let me go deeper into what makes the animation in this show so special, because I glossed over it earlier, and I think it deserves a real deep dive. When Ben Bacalé was working at Studio AKA before creating Gumball, he was making commercial, and Studio AKA was known for being experimental. They would combine different animation techniques within single 30-second spots. That DNA is all over Gumball. But what I find fascinating is how the show's mixed media approach evolved from a visual novelty into a genuine storytelling language. In Season 1, the character designs are roughly grouped by type. The Wattersons are 2D hand-drawn characters. Tina Rex is a 3D CGI dinosaur. The Donut Sheriff is a donut. Sussy is a puppet, specifically a real human chin with googly eyes and a wig, which is one of the most unsettling and brilliant character designs in animation history. The backgrounds are photographs of real locations, mostly around Elmore itself, which is based on various English and American suburbs. And all of these elements are composited together into a single frame. Now here's the thing about compositing. It's the unglamorous, behind-the-scenes work that makes or breaks a mixed media show. If the lighting doesn't match, if the perspectives are wrong, if the 2D characters cast shadows that don't align with the live-action environment, the whole thing falls apart. In Season 1, the compositing is good, but imperfect. You can sometimes see the seams. The 2D characters occasionally float slightly above the ground plane, or the camera perspective doesn't quite match the background. These are tiny issues that most viewers wouldn't consciously notice, but they affect the overall feel of the show. There's a slight disconnection between the characters and their world. By Season 2, Studio Soy had expanded their role to include rendering and compositing alongside the CGI work, and the improvement is immediate. The characters feel more grounded in their environments. The lighting is more consistent, and crucially, the show starts using the mixed media nature to create visual gags that only work because of the stylistic clash. A 2D character can interact with a CGI object in ways that play with your perception. The difference in dimensionality becomes a source of comedy and visual interest rather than a technical limitation. By Season 3 and 4, the show is doing things with its mixed media approach that I genuinely think have never been replicated. Guest animators are brought in to create special sequences that use entirely different animation techniques: hand-painted watercolor, pixelated retro game graphics, anime-style sequences, claymation. And these aren't random stylistic detours. They're integrated into the narrative. Nicole's flashbacks in The Choices use a softer, more painterly style to distinguish the past from the present. The anime fight sequences in Nicole's encounters with Yuki in The Fury and later episodes use full-on Japanese animation aesthetics because the characters are literally martial artists channeling anime energy. The show treats animation style as a form of characterization. Different characters don't just look different, they exist in different aesthetic registers. I think that's one of the most revolutionary ideas in modern animation, and Gumball doesn't get enough credit for it. When we talk about influential animated shows from the 2000s, 2000s, we tend to focus on Adventure Time's impact on serialized storytelling, or Steven Universe's impact on representation, or Gravity Falls' impact on mystery-driven children's narrative. But Gumball's contribution, the idea that animation style itself can be a storytelling tool, that visual diversity isn't just aesthetic, but meaningful, that's arguably the most radical innovation of the bunch. And it's an innovation that gets more sophisticated with every passing season. Let me tell you about a moment that perfectly illustrates this. In The Signal, Season 4, Episode 9, the show starts experiencing broadcast interference. The signal is degrading, and as it does, the animation style itself starts glitching. Characters momentarily swap art styles. A 2D character might briefly become CGI, or a CGI character might flatten into 2D. Background elements shift and warp. The audio desyncs from the video, and the characters notice. They can feel the interference. They don't understand what's causing it, but they can tell that something is fundamentally wrong with the way they're being rendered. This is only possible because Gumball established from the very beginning that different characters use different animation styles. The glitching works as a horror element because we intuitively understand that a character's art style is, in some sense, their identity. When the signal interferes and a character briefly appears in the wrong style, it's not just a visual effect. It's a violation of who they are. Their very nature is being corrupted. And this leads directly into the larger meta-narrative about the characters existing as constructs within a broadcast medium, which becomes central to Rob's motivations and the show's philosophical underpinning. Try pulling that off in a show with a uniform animation style. You can't. The visual language that makes this work only exists because Bacalé committed to mixed media from the very first episode. Alright, I want to talk about something else now. The show's relationship with internet culture, because I think Gumball is, bar none, the best animated series ever made at capturing how the internet feels. A lot of shows reference the internet. They'll have characters use social media or make jokes about going viral or include parodies of popular websites. Gumball does all of that, but it goes further. It captures the texture of online culture, the way memes work, the way arguments escalate on social media, the way algorithms shape our experiences, the way online identity differs from real-world identity. And it does this from a position of genuine understanding, rather than the "how do you do, fellow kids" energy that a lot of shows bring to internet references. The internet from Season 2 introduces the internet as a literal character, a towering, terrifying entity made of screens and wires. When Gumball posts an embarrassing video online and the internet takes it viral, Gumball has to physically confront the internet to get the video taken down. But the episode goes beyond the simple "be careful what you post" moral. It explores the way content takes on a life of its own online, the way the internet amplifies and distorts, the way digital humiliation can feel like a kind of death. Season 4's The Safety takes this further, with Darwin becoming obsessed with internet safety to the point of surveilling his family's every online activity. It's a sharp commentary on the surveillance state that emerges from good intention. Darwin genuinely wants to protect his family, but the methods he employs are invasive and controlling. And the episode doesn't offer easy answers, because the truth is that the internet is dangerous, and families do need to navigate that danger. But the solution can't be total control. And then there's Season 5's The Best, where Darwin's social media activism spirals into performative virtue signaling, and The List, where the show takes on listicle culture, and The Petals, which is essentially about beauty standards as mediated by social media. Each of these episodes demonstrates a deepening understanding of how digital culture shapes human behavior, and each one is sharper and more nuanced than the last. The revival series, The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, updates these themes for the mid-2020s with episodes like The Unfollow, which deals with the perverse psychology of social media validation. Gumball and Darwin become distressed when their literal stalker unfollows them online. The idea that being perceived, even negatively, even dangerously, has become preferable to being invisible is a devastating commentary on attention economics, and it's delivered with the show's trademark blend of absurdity and insight. This progressive deepening of internet culture commentary across seasons is another example of why the show gets better over time. Season 2 can make a joke about going viral. Season 4 can explore the surveillance implications of digital life. Season 6 can interrogate the existential crisis of living in a post-truth media landscape. And the revival can address the algorithmic manipulation of human attention. Each season has more tools, more context, and more sophistication to bring to these themes. Let me circle back to the characters for a moment, because I want to talk about some of the supporting cast members who illustrate the show's improvement. Take Alan, for instance. Alan is a balloon, literally a blue balloon with a face drawn on it. In season 1, he's barely a character. He appears in classroom scenes, he's nice, and that's about it. In season 2, we start to see that his niceness might be a front. Season 3's The Saint has Gumball trying everything possible to make Alan lose his temper, and failing, which becomes an exploration of whether pure goodness can actually exist, or whether it's always a performance. And then season 4's The Traitor reveals that Alan has a secret manifesto about rising to power through student council, framing his niceness as a calculated political strategy. That character arc, from background decoration to philosophical case study, is only possible because the show takes its time. Each new layer adds to what came before, rather than replacing it. Alan is still nice. He still looks like a balloon, but our understanding of what his niceness means keeps evolving. And that evolution tracks with the show's own increasing sophistication. Or take Sussy. Sussy is something else entirely. She's a puppet character, a real human chin turned upside down, with googly eyes stuck to it, wearing a wig. She's bizarre and unsettling, and somehow endearing. In the early seasons, she's used primarily as a source of random, disruptive humor. She says weird things. She behaves in ways that don't conform to any social norms, and the other characters react with confusion and mild horror. But as the show develops, Sussy becomes something more interesting. The Knight in season 4 has a dream sequence from Sussy's perspective that's one of the most genuinely surreal and fascinating pieces of animation in the show's history. Her dream world operates by a completely different logic than the rest of Elmore. It's dreamlike in the truest sense, following emotional associations rather than causal logic. And the implication is that Sussy isn't random. She's operating according to her own internal consistency that nobody else can perceive. She's not broken. She's just different, in a way that the show's world isn't equipped to understand. That's such a generous reading of a character who could easily be just a punchline, and the show earns it by taking the time to develop her context across multiple seasons. Season 1, Sussy is a joke. Season 4, Sussy is a commentary on neurodivergence and the limits of social understanding. That's growth. I want to talk about the finale now. Season 2's finale, not to be confused with The Inquisition, which is the series finale. The finale is an absolutely bonkers episode that I think sets up a lot of what the show eventually becomes. The premise is that the Wattersons have been causing destruction and chaos across Elmore for years, collapsing buildings, injuring people, destroying property, and nobody's ever held them accountable because the show resets at the end of every episode. In the finale, the citizens of Elmore finally demand accountability. They sue the Wattersons. They want restitution for every bit of damage the family has ever caused across 2 entire seasons of the show. This is season 2 doing something that most shows wouldn't attempt until much later in their run. It's explicitly acknowledging the consequences of the sitcom format. The episodic reset isn't just a storytelling convention. It's a shield that protects the characters from the consequences of their own action. And the finale asks, what happens when that shield is removed? The answer is catastrophic. The Wattersons are facing financial ruin, legal action, and social ostracism for things that they, and we, the audience, considered harmless episodic fun. The episode doesn't resolve this. It literally ends with the family surrounded by an angry mob, with Gumball breaking the fourth wall to say something to the effect of, "We'll figure this out next season." And season 3 begins with new episodes that have clearly reset the status quo. But the questions raised by the finale about accountability, about the ethics of episodic storytelling, about what we allow our fictional characters to get away with, those questions linger. They inform the show's later meta-commentary. They establish the principle that Gumball is a show that's willing to interrogate its own format, even if it doesn't always provide answers. I should also talk about the show's music more specifically, because Ben Lockett's compositions are genuinely extraordinary, and they evolve alongside the show in ways that are easy to overlook. The season 1 soundtrack is bright, bouncy, and heavily electronic. It sounds like a Cartoon Network show from 2011. By season 3, Lockett is incorporating orchestral elements for emotional scenes, using silence and negative space in ways that enhance the comedic timing, and creating leitmotifs for specific characters and situations that build meaning over time. The musical highlight of the entire series, for me, is the song that plays during Darwin's journey home in The Origins, Part 2. It's called I'm On My Way, and it's a simple, earnest, utterly heartbreaking piece of music that accompanies Darwin crossing deserts and mountains to get back to Gumball. The melody is childlike and vulnerable, and it perfectly captures the emotional truth of the scene. This is a fish who grew legs because he loves his brother, and he's singing about it with the sincerity that only a character in a children's show can get away with. And then compare that to the music in The Disaster and The Rerun, which uses aggressive electronic glitching and distorted sound design to mirror the breakdown of reality within the episodes. Same composer, same show, completely different emotional register. The range that Lockett displays across the series is remarkable, and it's another element that gets demonstrably better and more sophisticated with each passing season. Here's another tangent that I think is worth taking. I've been talking a lot about how the show improves in terms of writing, animation, and thematic depth, but I want to acknowledge something that I think is equally important. The show's pacing improves dramatically over its run. Early Gumball episodes sometimes struggle with pacing. They'll have a strong premise and good jokes, but will occasionally drag in the middle or rush the ending. By seasons 3 and 4, the pacing is near perfect. Every 11-minute episode is calibrated to within seconds. The setup, the escalation, the peak, the resolution, the final gag, all landing with precision. And this isn't just about the writing, it's about the editing, the way shots are held, the way transitions are timed, the rhythm of dialogue. Gumball develops an incredibly distinctive comic rhythm over its run, a tempo that's slightly faster than most animated comedies, but never frantic. Jokes land, and the show gives you exactly enough time to process them before moving on. Not too much, never so much that you lose momentum, but not so little that you miss them. That rhythmic precision is something that develops over time, as the entire production team, writers, animators, directors, editors, builds a shared understanding of what the show's tempo should be. Mike Graves directed every episode of the first 4 seasons, which is an astonishing feat of consistency. That single directorial vision is, I think, a major reason why the show feels so cohesive despite its visual diversity. Every episode, no matter how experimental, passes through the same directorial sensibility. And Graves' direction improves over time, just as everything else does. He becomes more confident, more willing to hold shots for emotional beats, more adventurous with camera moves and transition. When Graves stepped back after season 4, the direction was taken over by Sarah Fell and Antoine Perez, among others, and the transition was surprisingly smooth. Another testament to the strength of the show's established aesthetic and creative culture. By the time the revival came around, with Luke Allen and James Lancet serving as series directors, the creative infrastructure was robust enough to sustain the show's quality, even with significant personnel changes. Let me talk about the money from season 3 for a moment, because it's another quietly important episode in the show's evolution. The Wattersons have run out of money. They're completely broke, and as their financial situation deteriorates, the show itself starts to deteriorate. The animation quality drops. Product placements start appearing. The characters begin shilling for sponsors. The backgrounds get cheaper. It's a brilliantly literal representation of what happens to a TV show when the budget runs out. The world itself gets worse. This is the first time the show explicitly links its characters' circumstances to the production realities of television. The Wattersons' poverty isn't just a plot point. It's a threat to the very quality of the show they inhabit. If they can't sustain their world economically, the world will literally fall apart. And this idea that the characters are dependent on the show's continued production for their continued existence becomes the central anxiety of the later seasons and the driving force behind Rob's arc. The money ends with the family finding a sponsor, in this case, the fictional brand Joyful Burger, and the world snapping back to its normal production quality. It's played for comedy, but the implications are dark. These characters live in a world that could be degraded or destroyed at any moment if the invisible economic forces that sustain their universe decide they're not worth investing in. They exist at the pleasure of an invisible audience, invisible sponsors, invisible network executives who could cancel their world with a phone call. If that doesn't give you an existential chill, I don't know what will. And the fact that it's delivered in a funny, accessible, 11-minute episode aimed at children is what makes Gumball special. The show trusts its audience, of all ages, to engage with complex ideas, and it wraps those ideas in enough comedy and visual spectacle that the medicine goes down easy. Alright, let me talk about some episodes from Season 6 that I haven't addressed yet, because Season 6 has some absolute gems that demonstrate the show's peak level quality. The Shippening, Season 6, Episode 14, is an episode about fan fiction, literally. Sarah, the obsessive Gumball superfan character, gets hold of a magic notebook that makes whatever she writes in it come true. And what does she write? Fan fiction. Shipping fan fiction. She starts pairing up random characters in romantic scenarios, and the world around her reshapes itself to match her narratives. Characters who have never shown interest in each other suddenly develop passionate relationships. The natural order of the show's social dynamics is thrown into complete chaos because one person with a magic notebook decided that these two background characters should be in love. Bacalé has said in interviews that the inspiration for the shippening came directly from the show's fan community, particularly the fan art and fan fiction on DeviantArt. The episode isn't mocking fans. It's engaging with the creative energy of fandom, while also gently pointing out the absurdity of imposing romantic narratives on characters who have no chemistry or interest in each other. It's affectionate and satirical in equal measure, and it only works because the show has spent 5+ seasons building up a large enough ensemble of characters for the shipping to feel delightfully random. The Agent is another season 6 episode that I think is underrated. It focuses on Tinker, a government agent who has been secretly monitoring the Watterson family for years. The episode reveals that all the bizarre, reality-defying events the Wattersons have been involved in have attracted the attention of some kind of federal agency, and they've been under surveillance the whole time. It's a great example of the show taking a step back and asking, if all of this insanity were really happening, how would the outside world react? And the answer is, with bureaucratic incompetence and paranoid surveillance, which is probably accurate. And The Heart, an episode about Gumball discovering that Mr. Robinson, the perpetually grumpy neighbor, secretly cares about him. For the entire run of the show, Mr. Robinson has been the curmudgeonly old man who wants nothing to do with the Wattersons. And The Heart doesn't reverse that. Robinson is still grumpy, still antisocial, still fundamentally resistant to emotional connection. But the episode finds moments of genuine tenderness within that resistance, suggesting that Robinson's coldness is a defense mechanism rather than his true nature. Moments like these, small, character-driven, emotionally honest, are scattered throughout season 6, and they land harder because we've been living with these characters for so long. When The Heart makes you feel something about the Gumball-Robinson dynamic, it's drawing on 5 seasons of established history. The emotional payoff is cumulative. It only works because the show took its time, built its world, let its characters breathe, and then, in its final season, harvested all that accumulated investment. I've been going for a while now, and I feel like there's one more big thing I need to address before I really wrap this up. I've talked about how the show gets better in terms of writing, animation, themes, characters, music, and pacing. But there's a quality that underpins all of these improvements, and it's the hardest one to articulate. I'll try anyway. Gumball gets more confident every season. That sounds obvious, but it's actually a rare quality. A lot of shows become more confident and lose something in the process. They become slick, polished, but also predictable and self-satisfied. Gumball's confidence manifests differently. With each season, the show becomes more willing to take risks, more comfortable with silence, more trusting of its audience, more assured in its ability to navigate tonal extremes. Season 1 is a show that's trying to be liked. It's eager to please, eager to land its jokes, eager to establish its characters. There's nothing wrong with that. First season should be eager, but you can feel the effort. By season 6, the show has earned its place and knows it. It can spend an entire episode on a single joke if it wants to. It can let an emotional scene breathe without cutting away to a gag. It can get genuinely dark, genuinely weird, genuinely philosophical, because it's built up enough goodwill and trust with its audience to know that they'll follow it anywhere. That confidence is what allows The Inquisition to end on a cliffhanger that threatens to erase the entire world. A less confident show would have been afraid to leave its audience in that state. Gumball trusts that the emotional truth of the moment, the characters choosing to be themselves, even if it means oblivion, is powerful enough to sustain the ambiguity. And it is. It's been 7 years, and people are still talking about it, still debating it, still feeling it. That's confidence. And the revival continues this trajectory. The wonderfully weird world of Gumball doesn't try to recapture the energy of season 1 or play it safe. It immediately addresses the 7-year gap within its own narrative, picks up the meta threads left dangling, and pushes forward into new territory. The Bacalé, who made season 1, was a first-time creator figuring out his show. The Bacalé overseeing the revival is a veteran who spent over a decade building this world and knows exactly what it can do. I mentioned earlier that the writing team's creative process involves mining their own lives for stories. Bacalé and his collaborators have described their writing sessions as essentially excavating personal shame, taking embarrassing or problematic moments from their childhoods and turning them into comedy. And as the team has grown more comfortable with each other and with the show, those excavations have gone deeper. The personal stories become more vulnerable. The shame becomes more real. And because the raw material is more honest, the finished episodes are more resonant. This is true of the voice acting too. Teresa Gallagher has been playing Nicole Watterson for the entire run of the show. Listen to her performance in season 1 and then listen to it in season 6. The character is the same, but the depth of the performance is vastly different. In season 1, Gallagher is playing angry mom with skill and energy. In season 6, she's playing a fully realized human being, someone with a history, with pain, with joy, with complexity that transcends the sitcom archetype she was originally written at. Gallagher doesn't just voice Nicole, she inhabits her. And that inhabitation deepens with every season because Gallagher has more material to draw from, more backstory to inform her choices, more emotional context for every line. Dan Russell's Richard has undergone a similar evolution. Early Richard is a simple comedic creation. He's fat, he's lazy, he's stupid, end of character description. But Russell has found something in the character over the years that goes beyond the obvious comedy. There's a sweetness to Richard that the early episodes only hint at. He loves his family with an uncomplicated, unconditional love that's actually quite moving. He has no ambition, no drive, no ability to function in the adult world, but he has an infinite capacity for affection. And Russell's vocal performance communicates all of that. The warm stupidity, the genuine devotion, the moments of accidental profundity where Richard says something deeply true precisely because he's too dumb to know he shouldn't. I love the fact that Richard was originally described by Bacalé as being based on his own father, a giant man-child, and that Bacalé named the character Richard after his dad. There's an affection in the way Richard is written and performed that goes beyond satire. Yes, he's incompetent. Yes, he's the universe-destroying idiot whose mere employment can end reality. But he's also the guy who held baby Gumball and sang to him, who tried his best, even when his best was spectacularly inadequate, who loves his wife despite being utterly incapable of meeting her on any intellectual or practical level. The show loves Richard. It mocks him, but it loves him, and that love deepens with every season as we learn more about him and understand more about why Nicole chose him despite everything. Which brings me to one final point about why the show gets better. It's about empathy. The amazing world of Gumball becomes a more empathetic show with every passing season. In season 1, the humor is sometimes mean-spirited. Characters suffer for no reason. Humiliation is played purely for laughs. The world is indifferent to individual pain. As the show matures, it develops a conscience. It still has dark humor. It still lets bad things happen to its characters, but it understands those characters more deeply, and that understanding informs the way it treats them. By season 6, even the villains are sympathetic. Rob doesn't want to destroy the world. He wants to save it in his own misguided way. Larry isn't just a punching bag. He's a tragedy, a man whose labor sustains an entire civilization that takes him for granted. Nicole's rage isn't funny. It's the pressure valve of a woman carrying impossible burdens. The show doesn't excuse bad behavior, but it understands it. And that understanding makes the comedy sharper, the drama more affecting, and the overall experience richer. Empathy is a skill. It develops with practice. And Gumball practices it every season, getting better at seeing its characters as complete beings with inner lives and legitimate perspectives. The show starts by laughing at its characters and ends by laughing with them. And that shift from mockery to compassion, from surface to depth, is perhaps the most fundamental way in which the amazing world of Gumball gets better every season. I realize I've been talking for a very long time now, and there's so much more I could say. I haven't talked about the console, where the whole episode becomes an RPG video game. I haven't talked about the tape, which is a found footage episode made up of home movies. I haven't talked about the song, where every line of dialogue is sung. I haven't talked about the way the show handles its holiday specials, or its approach to side character spotlight episodes, or its sophisticated use of running gags that build and pay off across seasons. But I think I've made my case. The amazing world of Gumball gets better every season because it was designed to grow. Its mixed media world provides infinite visual possibilities. Its large ensemble provides infinite narrative possibilities. Its meta-awareness provides infinite conceptual possibilities. Its emotional core provides infinite room for deepening. And its creative team, led by Bockley, but encompassing hundreds of talented people across multiple countries and disciplines, have used all of those possibilities to build something that just keeps getting richer, funnier, smarter, and more beautiful. It's a show built from rejected things that became something irreplaceable. It's a family of mismatched animation styles that shouldn't coexist, but do. It's a world that knows it's a TV show and chooses to be its truest self anyway, even in the face of cancellation and oblivion. And every single season, from the rough charm of season 1 to the philosophical depths of season 6 to the confident reinvention of the revival, it gets better. Not because it changes what it is, but because it becomes more of what it always was. The Amazing World of Gumball started as a show about rejected cartoon characters who found a home together. 15 years later, it's one of the most decorated, most beloved, most artistically accomplished animated series in television history. And it's still going, still growing, still getting better. Not bad for a bunch of rejects. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. And remember, nobody's a nobody, and everybody is weird like you and me. Okay, I lied. I'm not done. I said goodnight, but I'm still here. And I think there's a whole other dimension of this conversation that we haven't even touched yet. And honestly, if you're still awake, if you're lying in bed or on the couch and you're still listening, then this next part is for you, because I want to go episode by episode through some of the deeper cuts that I think illustrate this show's growth in ways that the big landmark episodes don't always capture. Let me start with something from season 1 that I think retroactively becomes more interesting the more you watch. The Painting, episode 16 of season 1. Principal Brown gets worried about a picture that Anais drew of her family. The picture shows dysfunction. Nicole is depicted as angry, Richard is depicted as useless, and the kids are depicted as chaotic. Brown decides the family is dysfunctional and intervene, forcing Nicole to stay home, making Richard get a job, and sending the boys to work with the school counselor, Mr. Small. Now, on first viewing, this is a fairly standard sitcom episode. Authority figure misinterprets something, overreacts. Chaos ensues. Fine. But here's what makes it interesting in retrospect. The painting is accurate. The Watterson family is dysfunctional. Nicole is perpetually enraged. Richard is incompetent. The kids are chaotic. Anais drew the truth, and the truth made an authority figure uncomfortable. So the authority figure tried to fix the family by imposing normalcy. This is, in embryo, the same theme that the Inquisition tackles in the series finale. An authority figure trying to make the Wattersons normal, to sand off their rough edges, to force them into a conventional shape. In season 1, it's played as a simple comedy of errors. In season 6, it's an existential threat, but the DNA is the same. And when you notice these connections, these early season threads that the later seasons pull on and deepen, the whole show becomes a more cohesive, more intentional creation than it appears at first glance. The club from season 1 is another example. Gumball tries to join various school clubs, but gets rejected by all of them, except the Reject Club, a group of kids who couldn't get into any other club either. The premise is simple, but it's also foundational to the show's ethos. The Rejects aren't just a gag. They're a mirror of the show's own origin story. Rejected characters finding community together. Bockley took his rejected commercial designs and put them in a show. Gumball takes the rejected kids and puts them in a club. And both creations end up being more interesting, more dynamic, more alive than the normal alternatives they were rejected from. Let me jump forward to season 2 and talk about The Storm. This episode centers on Alan the Balloon and Carmen the Cactus, a couple whose relationship seems impossible because Alan is a balloon and Carmen has spines. Every time they get close, she pops him. The episode explores whether they can make their relationship work despite being fundamentally incompatible on a physical level. It sounds like a silly premise, and it is silly, but it's also doing something quite subtle with the show's mixed media concept. In a world where characters are made of different materials, rubber, paper, pixels, felt, photographic chin, physical incompatibility isn't just a metaphor. It's a literal, material reality. A balloon and a cactus can't touch without one destroying the other. And the show takes this seriously, using it as a framework for exploring what it means to love someone who is fundamentally different from you in ways that seem insurmountable. That's the kind of story that only Gumball can tell. Not because other shows can't explore incompatible love, of course they can, but because only Gumball can literalize the metaphor through its character design. The mixed media world isn't just a visual gimmick. It's a narrative engine that generates stories no other show could generate, because no other show has characters whose physical forms are so diverse and so loaded with meaning. Now let me talk about the sweaters from season 2, because I think it's one of the most underrated episodes in the show's run, and a perfect example of the show's increasing confidence in its own humor. Gumball and Darwin get challenged to a tennis match by two students from Richwood High who are straight out of an 80s sports movie. They have dramatic lighting, overwrought dialogue, and an intense competitive spirit. And Gumball and Darwin just don't care. They cannot be motivated to take the challenge seriously. They treat the whole thing as an annoying inconvenience that they'd rather not deal with. The joke is structural. The show is setting up a classic underdog sports competition narrative and then refusing to play it. The characters from Richwood High are operating in one genre, inspirational sports drama, while Gumball and Darwin are operating in another, absurdist comedy. And the clash between these genres is the entire joke. It's a deconstruction of narrative convention, executed not through dialogue or exposition, but through the characters simply refusing to engage with the premise they've been given. This kind of structural comedy, where the joke is about the shape of the story rather than the content of the jokes, becomes increasingly central to Gumball's identity in later seasons. The Test in Season 3 imagines what would happen if Gumball were replaced as the protagonist by a more boring, more conventional character named Tobias. The world literally reshapes itself around the new protagonist. The lighting changes, the music changes, the show becomes a generic sitcom, and Gumball, now relegated to a side character in his own show, has to fight to reclaim his role. It's one of the most meta episodes in the show's run, and it's only possible because the Sweaters established that Gumball is a show that's capable of commenting on the mechanics of television narrative. The Void from Season 3 deserves more discussion than I gave it earlier. This is the episode that introduces the Void, a dimension where Elmore sends its mistakes. Gumball, Darwin, and Mr. Small discover its existence when they notice that their classmate Molly has been erased from reality. Nobody remembers her. Her desk is gone. Her name has been removed from the register. She's been deemed a mistake by the universe and banished to the Void. Inside the Void, the show reveals some of its most ambitious world building. The Void contains real-world cultural artifacts that have been deemed mistakes. Things like VHS tapes, the Betamax format, discontinued products, canceled TV shows. It's a dumping ground for everything the world has moved past. And the implication, the terrifying implication, is that characters can end up there too. If Elmore decides you're unnecessary, if the narrative has no more use for you, you get erased. This is where Rob was trapped. This is why he's angry. This is why he becomes a villain. The Void isn't just a plot device. It's a metaphor for obsolescence, for cancellation, for the way our culture discards things and people when they're no longer useful. And the show treats this with genuine horror. The Void is presented as bleak, unsettling, empty. There's nothing fun about being forgotten. And here's the thing, the Void becomes more meaningful with each passing season because each season adds new context. In Season 3, it's introduced as a mysterious dimension. In Season 4, Rob's escape from the Void and his subsequent villainy give it personal stakes. In Season 5, the show explores the implications of the Void's existence more fully. What does it mean for a world to have a mechanism for erasing its own mistakes? In Season 6, the Void becomes an active threat as the show's cancellation approaches. And in the revival, the rewrite finally addresses the Void storyline head on. Each season makes the Void more important, more frightening, more relevant. Not because the show retcons it or adds arbitrary new rules, but because the cumulative effect of spending time in this world makes the stakes feel higher. We know more characters now. We care about more of them. The idea that any of them could be erased hits differently in Season 6 than it did in Season 3, because we've spent 3 additional seasons building relationships with these fictional people. Let me take a tangent here about something that Bacalé has said in interviews about the show's writing process, because I think it illuminates why the scripts get better over time. In a 2025 interview with Animation Magazine, Bacalé and his collaborators described their approach to episode development as falling into 3 categories. The first is stories from personal experience, real moments from the writer's childhoods, amplified to absurd proportions. The second is social commentary, taking something happening in the contemporary world and finding the comedic angle. The third is experimental episodes, stories that explore a specific animation technique or push the show's format in a new direction. What I find interesting about this framework is that all 3 categories benefit from time and experience. Personal stories get deeper as the writers get older and more reflective about their pasts. Social commentary gets sharper as the writers develop a better understanding of the world and the show's ability to satirize it. And experimental episodes get bolder as the production team masters more techniques and builds more confidence. The creative team also described their process of digging into everyone's past for their most shameful or problematic moments as children and turning those into comedy. That's a practice that rewards longevity. The longer you work together, the more comfortable you become sharing vulnerable material, and the more authentic the stories become as a result. I also want to spend some time on the show's relationship with genre. One of the things that makes Gumball unique among animated shows is its ability to shift genres within and between episodes with total fluidity. An episode can start as a family sitcom, become a horror movie, transition into an action thriller, and end as a romantic comedy. And because of the mixed media visual style, each genre shift comes with corresponding visual changes. The lighting shifts, the animation style adjusts, the music transforms. The disaster is a thriller. The origins is an adventure epic. The shell is a romance. The safety is a surveillance drama. The ghost is horror. The sweaters is a sports movie parody. The console is a video game. And all of these exist within the same show, performed by the same characters, in the same world. That genre fluidity is only possible because the show established from the beginning that Elmore is a world where anything can happen and any kind of story can be told. And like everything else about Gumball, the genre work gets more sophisticated with time. Season 1's horror elements are basic: jump scares, spooky atmospheres. Season 4's horror, in episodes like The Night and The Signal, incorporates existential dread, body horror, and the unsettling feeling of reality itself being corrupted. Season 1's romance is Gumball likes Penny and is awkward about it. Season 3's romance, In the Shell, is a Miyazaki-inspired epic about accepting someone's truest self. The genres don't just appear, they mature alongside the show. Let me dig into the parents from season 6, because I think it illustrates the show's emotional peak. Nicole hasn't spoken to her parents in 20 years. 20 years. That's a fact that's been hinted at throughout the series, but never fully addressed until this episode. When her parents, Daniel and Mary Cinecourt, finally come to dinner, the evening becomes a painful excavation of old wound. Nicole's parents pushed her relentlessly as a child. Her mother considered Nicole's gender a failing. Her father was cold and demanding, and Nicole's response at 18 was to cut them off entirely. The episode doesn't resolve this easily. There's no neat reconciliation. The Cinecourts try to reconnect, but the decades of distance have calcified the resentment. Nicole and her parents trace their grievances backward, trying to find the original wound, and eventually, they can't even remember what started it. They just know they're angry, and the anger has become its own justification. Darwin, sweet, earnest, conflict-averse Darwin, asks why they can't just make peace, and Nicole responds that they are at peace, separately. That's one of the most honest lines about family estrangement I've ever heard in any medium, let alone a children's cartoon. The idea that distance can be a form of peace, that some relationships are healthier with space than with forced reconciliation, is a mature, nuanced, unflinching truth that the show delivers without judgment. And then Gumball sings. He breaks into a song that's clearly designed to be an emotional manipulation. Orchestral swells, dimmed lights, tearful vocals. And before the song even gets going, Gumball himself breaks the fourth wall to say, "I know this is the cheapest, dirtiest kind of emotional manipulation." He acknowledges what the show is doing, even as it does it, and the moment is killed before it can land. This is season 6, Gumball at its most complex, aware of its own tactics, honest about its own limitations, unwilling to provide false catharsis. The parents don't reconcile. Nicole doesn't forgive her parents. The song doesn't fix anything. And that's the truth. That's what real family dysfunction looks like. Not every wound healed. Not every story has a happy ending. And the amazing world of Gumball, in its final season, has enough confidence and enough empathy to acknowledge that. Compare this to season 1, where family conflicts are resolved within 11 minutes through hugs and lessons learned. The distance between those two approaches, between easy resolution and honest ambiguity, is the distance the show has traveled, and it's enormous. I want to talk briefly about the show's voice actors one more time, specifically the kid voice actors, because the casting transitions are such an unusual and fascinating aspect of this show's history. Logan Grove was the original Gumball. He brought an innocent, slightly goofy energy to the character that perfectly suited season 1's more wide-eyed tone. Kwesi Boki was the original Darwin, warm, slightly squeaky, endearingly naive. When they were replaced by Jacob Hopkins and Terrell Ransom Jr. for season 3, the characters subtly shifted. Hopkins's Gumball was sharper, more sarcastic, better suited to the show's increasing cynicism. Ransom's Darwin had more emotional range, more capability for both earnest sweetness and fierce moral indignation. The voice change aligned perfectly with the show's tonal evolution. Nicholas Cantu took over as Gumball in season 5, and his performance added yet another layer, a knowingness, a self-awareness, a slightly world-weary quality that fit the show's increasingly meta-orientation. And now, in the revival, Alcayo Tile brings something fresh again, an energy that acknowledges the 7-year gap while maintaining the character's essential Gumballness. Each voice actor is suited to their era of the show, and the show's willingness to embrace these transitions, to make them part of the narrative rather than a disruption to it, is one of its most underappreciated innovations. Most animated shows treat voice changes as crises to be managed. Gumball treats them as opportunities for evolution. Now, here's something I've been wanting to say for a while, and I think this is the right moment. I think The Amazing World of Gumball is the most important animated series of the 2000s, not the best. That's a subjective judgment that depends on what you value, but the most important in terms of what it contributed to the medium. Here's why. Adventure Time showed that animated series could tell serialized, emotionally complex stories, but serialized storytelling already existed in live-action TV. Adventure Time adapted it for animation. Steven Universe showed that animated series could center marginalized identities and explore trauma. But representation narratives already existed in other media. Steven Universe brought them to children's animation. Gravity Falls showed that animated series could sustain complex mystery narratives. But mystery storytelling already existed. Gravity Falls adapted it for a younger audience. Gumball did something that no other medium had ever done. It built a world where multiple animation styles coexist as a storytelling language. It created a show that deconstructs the animated sitcom from the inside, while simultaneously being one of the best animated sitcoms ever made. It developed a meta-narrative that uses the production realities of television, recasting, budget constraints, cancellation, as plot points and thematic material. It demonstrated that the format of a show, its visual style, its broadcast medium, its economic model, can be as rich a source of storytelling as its characters and plots. These aren't adaptations of existing narrative forms. These are innovations specific to animated television, and they've influenced a generation of creators who are now working in animation, developing shows that take Gumball's lessons about mixed media, meta-narrative, and format as content to new places. The show's record speaks for itself. 8 BAFTA Children's Awards, an Annie Award, an International Emmy, a Pulcinella Award, a British Animation Award, critical acclaim across its entire run, a revival series that debuted to over 360 million minutes watched in its first week. These aren't the achievements of a show that peaked early and coasted. They're the achievements of a show that kept earning its audience's respect season after season by refusing to stop improving. And look, I know I'm biased. I run a YouTube channel dedicated to deep dives into animated series. This is my thing. I love Gravity Falls, and I love analyzing South Park, and I love every weird, ambitious, beautiful thing that animation has given us. But there's something about Gumball that feels special in a way I struggle to articulate, even after all these words. Maybe it's the origin story, a show made from rejected things, by a creator who was supposed to help other people pitch their ideas and ended up pitching the best one himself. Maybe it's the animation, the audacity of putting a 2D cat next to a CGI dinosaur, next to a puppet chin, next to a piece of toast on a real-world street, and saying, this is all one world and it all belongs together. Maybe it's the fact that the show named its characters after its creator's real family, that the chaos and love and dysfunction of the Wattersons is, in some essential way, the chaos and love and dysfunction of the Bacalais. Or maybe it's just that the show never stopped trying, never stopped reaching, never settled for being good enough. Every season, someone in that writer's room, or that animation studio, or that recording booth decided to push a little harder, dig a little deeper, try something a little bolder. And the cumulative effect of all that pushing across 6 seasons and 240 episodes, and now a revival series, is something that I think will be studied and celebrated and loved for decades to come. The Amazing World of Gumball gets better every season because it's a show that believes in growth, in its characters, in its craft, in its audience, and in itself. And the proof isn't in any single episode or any single moment. The proof is in the trajectory trajectory. Watch season 1 and then watch season 6 back to back and tell me you don't see a show that has evolved more than you thought possible. Tell me you don't see something remarkable. I bet you can't, because it is remarkable and it just keeps getting better. All right, now I'm really done. For real this time. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. And if you dream about Elmore tonight, about blue cats and goldfish brothers and a world where everything is weird and nothing makes sense, and somehow it all works out anyway, well, that sounds like a pretty good dream to me. See you next time. Wait, actually, you know what? I just thought of something. I've been so focused on the big picture, the season by season evolution, the landmark episodes, the meta narrative, that I've barely talked about the thing that first made me love this show. The jokes, the actual moment to moment, line by line comedy of the amazing world of Gumball. And honestly, if there's one thing that gets better every season alongside everything else, it's the sheer density and quality of the humor. Season 1 is funny, let me be clear about that. There are genuine laughs in season 1. Richard's obliviousness, Gumball's physical comedy, the absurdity of everyday situations in Elmore. It all works. But the humor in season 1 is relatively straightforward. A setup, a punchline, a visual gag. There's nothing wrong with that approach, and the show executes it well. But if you compare it to what comes later, the comedic sophistication of the early episodes is noticeably simpler. By season 2, the jokes start layering. You get the surface level gag for kids, the slightly darker interpretation for teens, and the genuinely adult subtext for parents watching along. The Job is funny because Richard on a scooter is inherently hilarious. It's funnier because reality is breaking apart. It's funniest because the whole episode is a commentary on the economic and narrative structures that sustain their world. 3 levels of humor in every scene, and the show rarely explains any of them. It trusts you to get what you get and enjoy whatever layer you're on. Season 3 introduces what I think of as surgical comedy. Jokes that are so precisely calibrated to their context that they couldn't work in any other episode, any other scene, any other moment. The banana scene in The Shell, where Gumball walks in on Banana Joe watching a video of an orange being peeled, which is clearly meant to be the Gumball equivalent of watching something inappropriate, is the kind of joke that works on multiple levels simultaneously. It's funny as a visual gag. It's funny as a character moment for Banana Joe. It's funny as a meta commentary on what constitutes inappropriate content for different species. And it's funny because the show trusts you to make the connection without ever making it explicit. By season 4, the show is confident enough to build entire episodes around a single joke concept, and then find 17 different variations of it. The slap takes one idea. Gumball wants a butt slap greeting from Tobias, and escalates it through increasingly absurd permutations for 11 minutes. The joke doesn't get old because each variation finds a new angle, a new context, a new way to make the same basic concept surprising. That's incredibly hard to do, and it requires a deep understanding of comedic rhythm that the show simply didn't have in its early episodes. Season 5's humor often operates on a philosophical level that I find genuinely mind-bending. The Test is funny because Tobias is a terrible protagonist, but it's also funny because it forces you to think about what makes a good protagonist in the first place. What qualities are we actually rooting for when we watch a show? Is Gumball a good protagonist? By conventional metrics, no. He's selfish, impulsive, and frequently wrong. But he's interesting. He's unpredictable. He's alive. And the show argues, through comedy, that interesting and alive are more important qualities in a protagonist than admirable or heroic. And season 6's humor is the darkest and most sophisticated of the run. The jokes about the show's own impending cancellation, the comedy derived from existential dread, the laugh so you don't cry energy of characters confronting their own potential non-existence. This is comedy operating at an extremely high level. It takes real confidence to make Oblivion funny, and the show manages it because it's spent 5 seasons building the trust and the tonal range necessary to go that dark without losing its audience. I want to highlight a specific comedic technique that Gumball uses better than almost any other show: the hard cut. A character will be in the middle of something, a dramatic moment, a confident declaration, an elaborate plan, and the show cuts immediately to the aftermath, skipping the execution entirely. The gap between the setup and the result is where the comedy lives. We see Gumball declare that his plan is foolproof, and then we immediately see him covered in burns and bandages. The hard cut implies the catastrophe without showing it, and our imagination fills in the gap with something funnier than anything the show could actually animate. This technique exists in season 1, but it gets sharper and more frequent as the show progresses. By season 4, the hard cuts are weaponized. They're used not just for individual jokes, but as a structural element of entire episodes. The Disaster uses hard cuts between temporal states as Rob manipulates reality. The Choices uses hard cuts between alternate timelines to show how different decisions lead to different outcomes. The technique scales up from a comedic tool to a narrative device, and that scaling is another manifestation of the show's increasing sophistication. I also want to talk about the show's use of silence. In early Gumball, silence is rare. The show is packed with dialogue, music, and sound effects. It's energetic, fast-paced, afraid of dead air. As the show matures, it learns to use silence as a comedic and dramatic tool. A held shot of a character's face, without dialogue, without music, can be funnier than any written joke. The Shell has moments of silence that are devastating in their emotional weight. The Choices lets its most important scenes breathe without rushing to the next beat. This is directly related to the show's growing confidence. Silence is the most confident choice a comedy can make, because it says, I trust this moment to work without any additional support. Season 1, Gumball doesn't trust itself enough for silence. Season 6, Gumball uses silence like a scalpel. Here's another thing that gets better. The cold opens. Early Gumball episodes tend to start with fairly generic scene setting. The family at breakfast, the kids at school, a normal day in Elmore. By the later seasons, the show opens with punches. The Inquisition opens with a strange new superintendent walking into the school. The Disaster opens with the Wattersons in their car, singing, completely unaware that their world is about to fall apart. The Origins opens with young Nicole and Richard, instantly establishing that this episode is going to be different from the norm. The Evolution of the Cold opens mirrors the evolution of the show itself, from cautious and conventional to bold and attention-grabbing. And it's a smart strategic choice for a show that airs on Cartoon Network, where you have approximately 10 seconds to convince a channel-surfing kid to stay. The later season's cold opens are engineered to hook you immediately, and they succeed far more often than the early season. Now, I want to address something that I think some viewers feel but don't always articulate. The concern that Gumball's increasing meta-awareness might come at the expense of its emotional sincerity. I've heard this criticism, that the later seasons are too clever, that the meta-commentary creates a distance between the audience and the characters, that it's hard to care about fictional people who know they're fictional. I understand the concern, but I don't think it's well-founded. And here's why. The meta-awareness in Gumball is never deployed at the expense of emotional truth. When the show breaks the fourth wall, it doesn't wink at the audience, as if to say, none of this matters because it's all made up. It does the opposite. It says, even though we're fictional, what we feel is real. Even though our world is constructed, it's the only world we have. Even though our stories are written, we experience them as if they're happening. The Inquisition is the ultimate expression of this philosophy. The characters know they're in a show. The show is ending. The void is coming, and they choose to face oblivion rather than become something they're not. That's not distanced or ironic. That's one of the most sincerely brave things I've ever seen fictional characters do. They're choosing authenticity over survival. They're saying that who they are matters more than whether they continue to exist. And the fact that they're fictional, that they know they're fictional, makes this choice more meaningful, not less. This is the paradox at the heart of later Gumball. The more the show acknowledges its own artificiality, the more emotionally real it becomes. Because the character's awareness of their fictional nature doesn't diminish their experience, it intensifies it. They know the stakes. They know that their world could be erased, that their memories could be rewritten, that their very identities are contingent on the continued interest of an invisible audience. And they keep going anyway. They keep loving each other, keep having adventures, keep being silly and stupid and brave and kind, because that's what they choose to do with the finite, fragile, fictional lives they've been given. If that's not profoundly moving, I don't know what is. And it only hits this hard because of the cumulative investment of 6 seasons. You need to have spent time with these characters, to have laughed with them and cried with them and watched them grow, for the philosophical weight of the later seasons to land properly. The meta-commentary is the final layer on a 6-layer cake, and it only works because all the other layers are solid. One more thing I want to discuss before I truly close: the show's legacy and influence. Gumball premiered in 2011, alongside shows like Adventure Time, Regular Show, and Gravity Falls. Those shows have all ended their original runs, and each has left a distinct mark on animation. But Gumball's influence is, I think, the hardest to trace directly, because its innovations are so specific to its own format that they're difficult to replicate. You can't easily copy Gumball's mixed media approach without it looking like a copycat. The visual identity of the show is so distinctive that any imitation would be immediately obvious. What other shows can borrow, and have borrowed, is the attitude. The willingness to be meta without being mean-spirited. The willingness to let characters be smart without making the show pretentious. The willingness to trust young audiences with complex themes. The willingness to let animation styles clash and find beauty in the collision. Shows like Kipo and The Age of Wonder Beasts, The Ghost and Molly McGee, and The Owl House have all, in different ways, carried forward elements of Gumball's spirit. The visual experimentation, the tonal range, the respect for young viewers' intelligence. The Craig of the Creek team has spoken about being influenced by Gumball's approach to building a richly populated suburban world, and the broader trend in 2020's animation toward mixed media and stylistic variety can be traced, at least partially, to the ground that Gumball broke. The revival series itself is proof of the show's enduring influence and appeal. The fact that a children's animated series from 2011 could come back in 2025 to massive viewership, 363 million minutes watched in its first week, ranking 10th in most streamed originals, tells you something about the show's staying power. These aren't just nostalgic adults rewatching their childhood favorite. These are new audiences discovering the show for the first time. Kids who weren't born when the original premiered, finding something in Gumball that speaks to them just as powerfully as it spoke to the original generation. And the revival doesn't coast on nostalgia. It evolves. It addresses modern concerns, social media anxiety, algorithmic manipulation, the gig economy, late capitalism absurdity, with the same sharp eye that the original series brought to the issues of its era. It brings in new characters and new dynamics while respecting the established ones. And it continues the show's trajectory of improvement, delivering episodes that are as good as, and in some cases better than, the original run's best. The announcement of a third and fourth season of The Wonderfully Weird World of Gumball, greenlit in December 2025, means this show has a long future ahead of it. And if the pattern holds, if the show continues to get better with every season, as it has for over a decade, then its best episodes might still be yet to come. That's an exciting thought. That's the kind of thought that keeps you up at night, wondering what Gumball and Darwin are going to do next, what new visual territory Studio Soy is going to explore, what new emotional depths Ben Bacalé and his team are going to plumb. I started this essay by asking a simple question. Why does the amazing world of Gumball get better every season? And I've spent a lot of words trying to answer it. I've talked about writing, animation, characters, themes, music, pacing, meta-narrative, voice acting, mixed media, genre, comedy, confidence, empathy, and legacy. And all of those are valid answers. They're all part of the truth. But if I had to boil it down to one sentence, if someone stopped me on the street and said, "Hey, why does Gumball get better every season?" and I only had a few seconds to answer, I'd say this: because it was made by people who loved what they were making. And love is the one thing that only gets stronger with time. That's it. That's the real answer. The writers love these characters. The animators love this world. The voice actors love these performances. The audience loves this show. And all of that love accumulates, season after season, episode after episode, joke after joke, until you have something that's not just better than where it started. It's better than almost anything else in its medium. The Amazing World of Gumball started as a show about rejected cartoon characters who found a home together. And now it is itself a home for millions of viewers around the world who come back to Elmore night after night, season after season, because something in this wild, impossible, beautiful world speaks to something real inside of them. If you're still listening, if you've made it this far, then you're one of those viewers. And I'm grateful you're here. It means the world to me that we can share this, that we can lie in the dark together and talk about a show we love and discover new things about it, new angles, new layers, new reasons to care. That's what Gumball teaches us in the end. That the things that seem silly and disposable, cartoons, goldfish, rejected ideas, can become the things we treasure most. That the world is full of wonder if you're willing to look for it. And that everything, every character, every story, every blue cat and his goldfish brother gets better when you give it time and love. Now I really am done. Good night, everyone. Sleep well, sweet dream, and I'll see you in Elmore. Oh, one more thing. I can't help myself. I've been thinking about this while talking, and I want to share one last observation before I really go. It's about the Wattersons' house, because I think the house is maybe the most underappreciated element of the show's world, and the way it evolves visually across seasons tells the story of the show's improvement in miniature. In season 1, the Watterson house is a relatively standard cartoon home. It has all the usual rooms: kitchen, living room, bedrooms, bathroom, and it exists primarily as a setting for family scenes. The live-action exterior photographs establish it as a real place, but the interiors are fairly generic cartoon spaces. They're functional. They do the job. By season 2, the house starts developing personality. Details accumulate. There's a specific stain on the ceiling. There's a particular arrangement of furniture that stays consistent. The wallpaper has a distinct pattern. The house starts feeling lived in, not just drawn. And this matters because a lived-in space tells you about the people who live in it. The Watterson house is messy, slightly broken, held together by sheer stubbornness, just like the family itself. By the later seasons, the house becomes almost a character in its own right. It has history. We know from the origins what it looked like when Nicole and Richard first moved in. Dilapidated, run down, a fixer-upper that they fixed up just enough to be habitable. We know that the basement contains secrets. We know that the attic has puppets, terrifying ones, as the puppets demonstrated. We know the neighbors, the street, the route to school. And here's what I love: the house changes. Not dramatically, not in ways that most viewers would consciously notice, but the art team makes subtle adjustments to the interior design across season. The furniture shifts slightly. New objects appear. Old ones disappear. The lighting changes. The house ages with the show, accumulating the visual equivalent of family memories. By season 6, the Watterson house feels like a place you've actually spent time in. You could navigate it with your eyes closed. This kind of environmental storytelling, using the physical space to communicate character and history, is something that animation can do exceptionally well, and Gumball does it with increasing sophistication across its run. The house in season 1 is a set. The house in season 6 is a home. And that distinction between set and home, between functional space and meaningful place, is really the distinction between the early and later versions of the show itself. Season 1, Gumball is a set. It's well designed, it's attractive, it serves its purpose. But the later seasons turn that set into a home. They invest it with meaning, with history, with the accumulated weight of hundreds of stories told in and around its walls. That's what improvement looks like in animation. It's not just about the lines getting cleaner or the scripts getting sharper. It's about the world becoming more real, more detailed, more layered with meaning, more like a place you'd actually want to visit. Or, in the case of these late night videos, a place you'd want to drift off to sleep in. Speaking of which, let me talk about one very specific thing that I think contributes to Gumball's quality as a fall asleep to show, which is obviously relevant given that's what we do here on Cortoon. The show has a remarkable sonic texture. The mix of music, dialogue, ambient sound effects, and carefully timed silence creates an audio environment that's engaging without being jarring. You can listen to Gumball with your eyes closed and still follow most of what's happening because the sound design is so rich and descriptive. Earlier seasons are louder and more frenetic. The sound design matches the show's eagerness to entertain, with lots of wacky sound effects and constant musical scoring. As the show matures, the sound design becomes more nuanced. Background ambiances are introduced: the hum of the Watterson house, the distant sounds of Elmore, the specific acoustic quality of different spaces, like the school hallway versus the living room. These ambient textures make the world feel three-dimensional, and they're incredibly soothing when you're half asleep and just letting the audio wash over you. The voice performances become smoother too. The actors find their rhythms. They stop pushing so hard for laughs and let the material do more of the work. The cadence of conversation in later Gumball is almost musical. There's a flow to the dialogue that carries you along without demanding full attention. You can drift in and out, catching a joke here, an emotional moment there, a weird sound effect that makes you smile. And the show accommodates that partial attention viewing mode without losing its coherence. This is actually quite difficult to achieve. Most comedy shows need your full attention to land their jokes. Gumball, especially in its later seasons, works on multiple attention levels simultaneously. Full attention, you get every joke, every visual gag, every meta reference. Partial attention, you get the general flow of the story, the emotional beats, the occasional laugh out loud moment. Background listening, you get a warm, familiar, comforting audio landscape that feels like home. That multi-level accessibility is another thing that improves across seasons. As the show becomes more confident in its own texture and more aware of its audience's varied viewing habits. Alright, I also want to spend a moment on the international dimension of this show, because I think it's really relevant to understanding how Gumball evolved. This is a British production, made in London, animated in Germany by Studio Soy, and in Ireland by Boulder Media during the first season, with additional storyboarding from French studio Bobby Pills during the revival. The writing team includes people from across Europe and beyond, and the show is set in America, in the fictional town of Elmore, California. This international DNA gives Gumball a perspective that most American animated shows lack. There's a European sensibility to the humor, a dryness, a willingness to let awkward silences linger, a comfort with ambiguity that American comedy tends to avoid. But there's also an American sensibility to the energy, the fast pace, the big emotions, the larger-than-life characterizations. The combination creates something that feels genuinely transatlantic, a show that speaks to audiences across cultures because it draws from multiple cultural traditions simultaneously. Bocquelet himself embodies this fusion. He's French-British, raised in France, educated at the École des Métiers du Cinéma d'Animation in Angoulême, and then moved to London, where he built his career. He's said in interviews that he wanted Gumball to feel like the kind of family entertainment that Steven Spielberg made in the 80s. The movies that felt big and adventurous and fundamentally American, but were made with a European attention to craft and detail. This international production model also means that the show draws from a wider pool of animation talent than a purely American production would. The guest animators who contribute special sequences come from studios around the world, each bringing their own cultural and aesthetic traditions. The result is a show that looks and feels genuinely global, not in a bland, culturally neutral way, but in a richly specific way that celebrates the diversity of animation traditions worldwide. And the international production model improves the show over time for a simple but important reason. It expands the network of creative relationships. Each season, the team works with more people, builds more connections, discovers more techniques. The production pipeline becomes more efficient and more capable. Studios that have been collaborating for years develop a shorthand that allows them to push each other further. The improvement isn't just about individual talent growing, it's about the collective capability of the production expanding with each new season. I keep coming back to this idea of accumulation. Gumball is a show that gets better because it accumulates skill, trust, history, complexity, meaning. Nothing is wasted. Everything that was planted in season 1, every character, every design choice, every thematic concern is eventually harvested and built upon. The show is a living system, and like all living systems, it grows. And here's my final thought. I promise, for real, this time. There's a song in the compilation, a season 4 episode, called Weird Like You and Me. It's a musical number where the entire cast sings about how everybody is different and nobody is a nobody. It's the kind of song that, in lesser hands, would feel saccharine and forced. But in the context of Gumball, a show about rejected characters, about mixed media, about the beauty of things that shouldn't coexist but do, it feels earned. It feels true. Nobody's a nobody, and everybody is weird like you and me. That line is the thesis statement of the entire show, and it gets truer with every season because every season adds more characters, more stories, more styles, more perspectives to the world of Elmore. Every season demonstrates, through its own creative ambition and visual diversity, that weirdness is not a weakness, that difference is not a deficiency, that the strangest, most improbable combinations can produce something beautiful. The amazing world of Gumball is the strangest, most improbable combination in modern animation, and it produces something beautiful, season after season after season. Now, I really, truly, actually am done. Good night, everyone. Sleep well. And remember, in Elmore, tomorrow is always a new episode. Okay, I know I keep saying I'm done, but I just realized I never properly talked about some key season 3 and 4 episodes, and I'd be doing the show a disservice to leave them out. So consider this an extended bonus section for the truly dedicated night owls among us. If you're somehow still awake, this is your reward. The Oracle from season 3 is one of those episodes that seems like a straightforward comedy when you first watch it, but becomes increasingly important to the show's mythology on subsequent viewings. Banana Barbara, Banana Joe's mother, paints pictures that predict the future. She's been doing this quietly in the background since her paintings first appeared in The Shell and in The Oracle. Gumball discovers that one of her paintings depicts him naked in the Elmore Mall. Naturally, he spends the entire episode trying to prevent this future from coming true, and naturally, his attempts to avoid the prediction cause it to happen. That's a fun time loop style comedy plot, but what makes The Oracle significant is what it establishes about the nature of Elmore's reality. If Banana Barbara can paint the future, then the the future is already determined. Events in Elmore follow a script. The characters' actions are predetermined. And this idea that the characters are living in a pre-scripted reality becomes the philosophical backbone of the show's later seasons. It connects to the void, to Rob's awareness of the show's nature, to the meta-narrative about television production as a kind of fate. Banana Barbara is painting episodes before they air. She's a character who can see the script, and the show never makes this explicit. It never has a character turn to camera and say, "We live in a predetermined universe controlled by writers." It just plants the seeds and lets them grow. Season 3 plants the Oracle. Season 4 lets Rob discover the Universal Remote, a tool that can manipulate the script of reality. Season 5 explores what happens when characters become aware of their scripted nature. Season 6 reaches the logical conclusion: if the script ends, so does the world. Each season builds on what came before, but the individual episodes work perfectly on their own as standalone comedies. The mythology is optional. The comedy is not. The Others from Season 4 is another episode that deserves attention. It introduces Claire Cooper and a group of characters who have always existed in Elmore but have never been shown on screen. Gumball becomes aware that there are entire groups of people in his school who he's never interacted with. People who have their own stories, their own dramas, their own lives. The episode is shot in a different visual style for Claire's segments. More muted, more realistic, like a teen drama rather than a cartoon comedy. And Gumball's intrusion into Claire's story causes chaos because his cartoon energy doesn't fit into her more grounded narrative world. This is the show explicitly acknowledging that the main character's story is not the only story being told in Elmore. There are other genres happening simultaneously: teen dramas, slice of life stories, romances, and they all coexist in the same world, just like the different animation styles coexist in the same frame. The Others expands the show's universe, not by adding new locations or mythology, but by acknowledging the existence of perspectives that the camera usually doesn't follow. And here's what I love about this: it's an inherently empathetic concept. The episode is asking Gumball, and by extension the audience, to consider that the people in the background have lives as rich and complex as the people in the foreground. This is Gumball's version of the Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead idea. What are the minor characters doing when the main characters aren't looking? The answer is living, having experiences, being protagonists of their own story. And the show treats this revelation with genuine wonder rather than cynicism. The Bus is another Season 4 episode that deserves a mention. It's the show's take on a heist movie. Gumball and Darwin are on a school bus that gets hijacked, and the episode plays out as a tense, action-packed thriller, complete with hostage negotiations, high-speed chases, and a twist ending. The twist: that the hijackers are actually Richard and Nicole in disguise, trying to teach the kids a lesson about stranger danger, is hilarious. But what makes the episode special is the genre execution. For 11 minutes, Gumball convincingly pretends to be a completely different kind of show, and it pulls it off with style. This genre fluidity is something I touched on earlier, but it's worth emphasizing again because it's so central to why the show gets better. Every genre experiment teaches the production team new skills. Doing a heist movie teaches them about tension and pacing. Doing a horror episode teaches them about atmosphere and dread. Doing a romance teaches them about emotional timing. Each genre experiment makes the team more versatile, and that versatility compounds across season. By Season 6, the team can convincingly execute almost any genre within the 11-minute format, which means the range of stories they can tell is virtually unlimited. I should also talk about The Question from Season 3, an episode where Gumball and Darwin set out to answer the ultimate philosophical question: what is the meaning of life? They ask everyone in Elmore, and nobody has a satisfying answer. The episode becomes a surreal journey through different perspectives: materialist, spiritual, nihilist, absurdist, and it never settles on a definitive answer. What I love about this episode is its genuine intellectual curiosity. It doesn't treat philosophy as a joke or as something too complicated for its audience. It engages with the question honestly, presents multiple perspectives fairly, and arrives at a conclusion that's both humble and profound. Maybe the question itself is more important than the answer. Maybe the act of asking is what gives life meaning. That's a real philosophical position. It echoes thinkers from Socrates to Albert Camus, and the show presents it with total sincerity, wrapped in comedy and absurdity. A banana, a piece of toast, and a blue cat debate existentialism, and it works. It works because the show has earned the right to be sincere by this point, and because the mixed media world, with its impossible characters and impossible physics, is actually the perfect setting for philosophical inquiry. If a goldfish can grow legs through the power of love, then What can't be possible? What rules actually apply? What does it mean to exist in a world where the rules can change at any moment? These questions don't have answers. But the fact that the show asks them and keeps asking them with increasing sophistication, season after season, is part of what makes it special. I want to mention The Routine from season 4 one more time. An episode where Richard goes to the store to buy groceries and it becomes an absurd, epic odyssey. What should be a simple, mundane task escalates into something approaching a hero's journey, with Richard battling obstacles and traversing landscapes that would challenge an action movie protagonist. And through it all, Richard remains obliviously cheerful, treating each escalation as a minor inconvenience. The episode is a perfect encapsulation of what Gumball does best, taking something ordinary and making it extraordinary. A trip to the store, a pizza delivery, a fight over the remote. These are the most mundane scenarios imaginable, and the show transforms them into events of cosmic significance. And the later seasons do this with more skill and more ambition than the early ones, because the show's command of escalation, the art of starting small and building to something huge, improves dramatically over time. Early Gumball episodes escalate, but sometimes the escalation feels arbitrary. Things get bigger because the show needs them to get bigger. Later, Gumball episodes escalate organically. Each step follows logically from the previous one, even when the logic is insane. The job escalates from Richard gets a job to the universe is collapsing through a chain of causation that, within the show's internal logic, makes perfect sense. The disaster escalates from a kid finds a remote to reality is being weaponized through a series of creative uses of the remote's functions that feel inevitable in retrospect. The escalation is more satisfying because it's more earned, and that's another way the show gets better every season. It gets better at escalation. The stakes rise more naturally. The comedy builds more effectively. The emotional peaks are higher because the valleys are deeper. It's the fundamental craft of storytelling, and the Gumball team masters it more fully with every passing year. I think I'm finally ready to close for real now, and I want to leave you with an image. Picture Elmore at night, the street outside the Watterson house, the live-action photograph of a real suburban street, slightly desaturated, lit by a digital moon that hangs in a painted sky. The house is quiet. The lights are off. Inside, the Wattersons are asleep. A blue cat, a pink rabbit, another pink rabbit, a goldfish with legs, and a tiny bunny genius. 5 impossible creatures in an impossible house in an impossible town, and they're at peace. This is what Gumball gives you. Not answers to life's big question, though it asks them beautifully. Not resolution to every narrative thread, though it ties off more than you'd expect. Not perfection, though it gets closer every season. What it gives you is a world that feels real, despite being impossible. Characters who feel human, despite being cartoon animals and objects and puppets. Stories that feel important, despite being, on their face, about the dumbest possible things. And it gives you this, the knowledge that the rejected, the discarded, the overlooked, the weird, they all have stories worth telling. They all have lives worth living. They all belong somewhere. Even if that somewhere is a mixed media town in a show that couldn't decide on just one animation style. Every season of the amazing world of Gumball is better than the last, and every episode is proof that the world is stranger, funnier, sadder, more beautiful, and more surprising than any of us think. Good night, sleep well. I'll see you in Elmore.